So hello guys, this is your all-time favorite Snazzy, so today we are going to see what if Frieza was God? Part 2. So let's move on to video. King Cold's fist slammed into Frieza's jaw so hard that it created a sonic boom which shattered the ice of Blizza for miles around. He was launched several meters away, smashing through multiple ice spires and landing beside his bruised and bloodied older sibling. Frieza and Cooler, both in the fourth forms, stood up panting for breath and glared at their father, who stood towering above them in his second form. Your mother is gone now, nobody else to coddle you. If you're going to be my heirs, you'll need to be strong. King Cold remarked with a menacing growl in his voice. Cooler and Frieza were both still young, just in their teenage years, and their powers were far from their peak. They were at their limit, but King Cold only had a few scratches on his muscular body. The two brothers lunged at King Cold, launching punches and kicks as fast as they could, only for King Cold to rapidly move his forearms and deflecting every single strike without breaking a sweat. His arms shot up faster than the two Arcosian princes could react to, and he seized both of them by the throats and held them in a vice-like grip. Look at all the weakness she instilled in the both of you, filling your heads with nonsense notions. Cold snapped, his grip tightening, forming purple bruises on their throats. I have to beat the weakness out of you too, undo the damage that witch caused in life. At this, Frieza gave a yell of anger and red Kai bursts from his eyes, blasting Cold's cheek and forming black burns along his cheek. Cold roared in pain and released his grip on both boys, who both started hammering their fists into the monarch's face with as much force as they could muster. For a brief stupid moment, Frieza honestly thought they could win. Frieza, put everything you've got into this, Cooler called out. The two brothers yelled and pulled their arms back in unison for a final powerful combined punch. In a single nanosecond, Cooler sidestepped their fists and struck Cooler with a single punch to the ribs which knocked the older Arcosian unconscious. He grinned at Frieza and punched him in the brow. Ironically, it was the blow in his dream that knocked him unconscious, was the pound in his dream in which he awoke in the real world. Or Frieza assumed it was, his current surroundings were so alien compared to the blue fields of Namek. The pain in his body was real enough, and even through his slightly blurred vision, Frieza could see he was back in his fourth form. He was constricted, his arms and legs and tail tightly gripped by what looked to be mechanical tentacles. "Ngh the hell," Frieza said hoarsely. His eyes glanced around again, and he noticed Inyan, still unconscious and in her base form, also tangled up in a metallic web. For whatever reason, Cooler had decided to keep her alive too. "Ah, brother. So glad you're awake." Cooler's voice echoed through the massive chamber of steel and twisted circuitry. When Frieza glanced to the source of the voice, he was filled with a sense of fear and sorrow he hadn't sensed since the death of his mother. There was what remained of Cooler's organic body, 3/4 of his head, his neck, and only the left quarter of his torso, with a pitiful stump of an arm left. From the ground and the ceiling, a web of metal kept Cooler's remained upright, and it was this same metal that filled the gaps in Cooler's skull. He's alive, but this is no way to live, Frieza thought to himself, recalling how he had been maimed and briefly replaced with mechanical parts. It seemed like nothing compared to the nightmare that remained of Cooler's body. I will assimilate you into the big Jeet star, and your monkey companions Kai will make for a suitable energy boost to the computers. Cooler explained, his words fully knocking Frieza from his dazed stupor. The Namekians, Frieza grunted weakly, trying to formulate a question. His consciousness had returned fully, but a great pain still racked his body. I will send my army out to retrieve them in time, they will make for excellent reserve fuel. Cooler's remains explained. It was at that moment that Frieza realized the metal that covered the missing portions of his head and face had created a jagged crude maw for Cooler to speak through. "And no have to get my wish," Frieza grunted, clenching his fists and straining against the metal wires constricting him. It was at this moment that he heard Inyan groan, her eyes blinking awake the few. She groaned sleepily as she looked around. "I have had enough of your resistance, Frieza," Cooler explained, ignoring Frieza and Inyan's words, his remaining organic eye narrowing menacingly. "You will merge with the big Jeet star, it will be your penance for the failures you've inflicted on our family's honor, and it will be your chance to rebuild the empire you lost," Cooler growled. Suddenly both she and Frieza screamed out in agony, lighting running down the wires, keeping them restrained. In Inyan's case, her Kai was being painfully drained, and in Frieza's case, nanomachines were being forced into his body. With a great urgency he sent a telepathic message to Inyan. Inyan, listen to me, we need to power up, overload those machines with as much Kai as we can spare," he ordered. He received no more response, but once he saw her hair turn gold, he knew it was order received, and a flash of light his body expanded and he transformed into his super Arcosian form, aiding Inyan in overloading the machinery around them. "What are you doing? Stop it right now," Cooler roared, a large metal body forming beneath the tattered remains of his head, a crude shambling mockery of a human body made up of wires and circuits and metal chunks. It quickly grew to a gigantic size, several times larger than Frieza himself. Ignoring his steadily advancing giant, Frieza and Inian kept yelling and powering up. Their Kai flooded the circuitry of the ship and the walls and floors around them began to explode sporadically in various parts. Finally, the bindings restricting the two fatigued warriors exploded off their bodies, leaving them floating within the metal chamber. Frieza saw his brother's giant fist flying toward him and he raised both his hands in a futile attempt to block the strike. The fist struck his palms and Frieza slowed the movement for a split second before he was launched clean across the chamber. A red glow formed in Cooler's cybernetic eye and a searing hot beam of red Kai fired out toward Frieza. The wounded tyrant flew around and deftly dodged the optic laser, which was forming burns and molten scorches along the metal surfaces it hit off of. "I'll kill you for this, nobody will defy me, and I won't let you kill me, I'll crush the life out of you for the damage you've caused," Cooler yelled, metal spears and tendrils launching from the smoke and trying to ensnare him. Frieza dipped and dodged around the projectiles and shot one hand out, a glowing purple death beam shooting from his fingertip and blowing a hole in Cooler's metal abdomen. To Frieza's shock and annoyance, the wires simply reformed around the hole and closed the wound. Suddenly, tendrils flew from the darkness and bound his wrists, ankles and his torso. The machinery compressed so tight into Frieza's skin that it was leaving grotesque purple abrasions on his snowy skin. "Gus H shit," Frieza yelled out as his pain grew. His gaze settled on a gold spark behind the meta-cooler core, it could only be Inian. She sucked in her breath atomic with a roar she fired out a massive Kai bullet from her jaws, burst a blast hit Cooler in the base of his spine and completely vaporized his legs, leaving his disembodied upper half to crash loudly into the metal floor. "Take that, you bastard," Inian grunted through heaving breaths. Having expended all her Kai, her hair drooped down and went from gold back to red and she hit the metal floor with a thud. Frieza tore free from the wires, feeling his alien blood trickling down some freshly opened scars and flew at Cooler's remains with a red orb of Kai in his hand. "I'm sorry, brother," he called out as he shot the Kai ball out. At the last moment, before his Kai ball struck, he saw all the life leave Cooler's remaining eye and then he was wiped out, his organic parts utterly reduced to nothing but ash. Before Frieza could mourn the death of his older sibling and last blood relative in the galaxy, the big Jeet star started to rumble and random explosions rang through the corridors. He glanced to Inian, unconscious and helpless, and figured that if he abandoned here the Super Saiyan would be guaranteed to die. "But she didn't abandon me. And I probably couldn't have destroyed all of Cooler's body with what little Kai I had left, damn it all, curse this morality nonsense." He thought to himself as he flew down and draped the unconscious Super Saiyan over his shoulders. Frieza flew with the unconscious Inian as fast as his weakened body could move him, dodging and outrunning explosions all around them. "Where the hell is the exit? This place is a damn labyrinth," he snarled, his red eyes darting around everywhere. "Damn it all, I've barely got any energy left to waste, but oh fuck it," Frieza spat, forming a purple Kai shield around his body and flying straight through the walls between them and the outside world. They finally burst through the walls, emerging in the green Namekian skyline. Come on just a little further," Frieza grunted out, straining his body to the limit and flying himself and Inian as far away from the slowly ascending big Jeet star as he could manage. Suddenly an explosion, from where Frieza could not say, broke through Frieza's Kai barrier and sent the two hurtling across the sky at an even faster pace. He could see the Shatterstar so close, a purple diamond glinting in the distance. Pain racked his body and a strangled gasp of agony escaped Frieza's lips, his body slowly contracting to a smaller size. "And no, not yet," he croaked weakly, his body giving out on him. His consciousness faded and he and Inian hit the blue grass of Namek with a powerful crash. "I really fucking hate father's sparring sessions." Cooler grunted, clenching and unclenching his purple fist. If it weren't for the medicine machines, that hand would still be broken. Young Frieza gave a small nod in response. I'm a little scared, brother," Frieza admitted, sitting up off the foot of his bed and looking up to his lanky older sibling. Cooler gave a small sneer until he noted the emotion flashing in his sibling's face. "I miss mother. And it's like father didn't care about her at all," Frieza added, staring down at his 3 feet. Yes, he seemed not to care, almost as if he were the one who. Cooler stopped mid-sentence and looked down at his younger brother. "Aw, never mind, just my imagination." He reached down and gave Frieza a small pat on the head. "Look, it's clear you need to clear your head, little brother," he said, walking over to the window of Frieza's bedroom and opening it, a small chill entering which neither brother paid attention to. "Huh? What are we going to do?" Frieza asked, approaching his brother. Cooler gave an irritated snort. "Don't ask so many questions, I'm just trying to do something nice. Now shut up and follow me, we're doing some exploration," he said. Despite his gruff tone, Frieza detected a hint of brotherly affection. "Oh okay, Cooler. Let's go, Frieza replied, powering up slightly and flying out the palace window, flying side by side with his brother. It was one of the last times the two brothers were ever kind with each other. Frieza groggily opened his eyes, seeing nothing but green water around him. He tried to speak and then felt a breather on his mouth and realized he was in a medicine machine. Thank Fiu, the crew of the Shatterstar had come to aid him. Ah, guys, Lord Frieza is awake, Ace called through the glass, approaching the medicine machine. Sheesh, Lord Frieza, you've been unconscious for like 8 hours, dunno what you did, but it caused a big Jeet star to explode in outer space and caused all the metacoolers to explode. Ace explained, looking in through the glass of the medicine machine. Well, despite all the pain, there was some good news. Through the intercom of the medicine machine, Frieza simply croaked out Inyan. Ace gave a small nod and Midgio and Polari soon joined the Lilac Arcosian. Alive and well, Lord Frieza. She's still unconscious though, she was drained utterly dry. She'll make a full recovery though. Midgio explained, thumbing over a clipboard of readings. Inside the pod, Frieza breathed a sigh of relief. Excellent, he remarked, checking over his current power level. By his reckoning he had only healed enough to access over 30% of his Kai, but that was still greater than the power of any Namekian he knew. He was rather sore though, and he did notice that the purple lacerations those wires had given him were only partially faded, making it look like he'd been diced up and crudely stitched back together. Bah, he'd be fine. He pressed a button on the side of the medicine machine, draining the healing juices, and then he unlocked the door and stepped out onto the ship floor. He could note the confusion on his allies' faces and gave a casual scoff. I'm going to talk to the Namekian villagers and get the Dragon Balls from them. Restore Arcos and its people. He explained. As he went to leave the medbay, Frieza noted a large pile of metacooler fragments on a desk. No doubt recovered by the others for experimentation by Midgio. One of you come with me. I'm going to try using UG diplomacy and I need someone to try and keep my temper in line. Frieza remarked. Polari was the one to join him at his side and followed him from the craft. It didn't take too long at all to reach the Namekian village from earlier, the green alien standing stone still, rigid in fear at the sight of Frieza. He was, even in his weakened state, millions of times stronger than even the mightiest Namek. Why have you come back here, you monster? The portly Namekian, evidently the leader of this community, asked. Two small children clung to the legs of his white trousers and Frieza faintly recalled killing both of them. I need your Dragon Balls. Frieza answered, figuring there would be no surprise to the response. Polari stood as still as she could, worried by the tension hanging thick in the air, even she was receiving venomous glances from the villagers, despite having nothing to do with what happened to the old planet Namek. You will never have them. The elder said adamantly, despite the small beads of sweat forming on his green egg-shaped head. We will never aid you in your vile quest for immortality, no matter how much you threaten and harm us. We endured your horrors once, and we would endure them 1,000,000 times more without giving in to your cruel demands. Murray spat, his rage growing with every passing moment. You think I'm not above killing you? Frieza asked, letting a hand rest on his hip, purple lightning sparking down his pale fingertips. You kill me, and the Dragon Balls lose their power. Murray said, deploying his trump card and smirking in satisfaction. The surprise on Frieza's face was very obvious, and the Kai stopped forming on his hand. You don't understand, the wish isn't for me, it's for my planet. It's been destroyed. My race all but wiped out. He pleaded. Polari gave a sincere nod, affirming the story. I please. Chokes of sorrow escaped Frieza's lips, and his vision began to blur. He was so frustrated, so filled with sorrow and anger between killing his last relative, these nightmares that plagued his sleep, and now not being able to help his people. He collapsed to his hands and knees before the elder Namek, who was taken aback and shocked. Please, I know I've been wretched my entire life, and I never expect you to forgive me for what I've caused you, but he trailed off and clenched his fists in the blue grass. You can't just punish my people and my race for my cruelty, they're innocent in all of this, he pleaded. There was a long silence, Polari looking down at Frieza in shock and concern for her monarch. Murray honestly had no idea how to respond. Frieza looked up, true sorrow in his eyes. Murray pinched the bridge of his nose. I suppose that giant squid did drain a lot of new Namek's life force though, and almost irreparable damage to the soil on the northern hemisphere. We'd need to fix that, and then 90 days later, they should be fit for Y. What? Grand Elder, you can't be serious, one Namekian warrior snapped, stepping forth from the crowds. This is the same monster that savaged our race over 2 years ago, why should we aid him? Murray gave a sigh, we are not a vengeful species, Eska. And if it is for his race, his intentions are benevolent, and besides we do owe Frieza for saving us from the giant squid creature. Murray replied, as if in disbelief at his own words. You'll help our race. For real? Oh thank you Master Namek, Polari squealed, pulling Murray in and hugging him tight. Ah thank you young lady, but could you please release me? "Your grip is rather powerful," Murray said, giving a small grunt of discomfort. Polari gave a nervous laugh and floated back, landing on the blue grass beside Frieza, who was slowly getting to his feet. Disbelief and shock marked the former tyrant's face. "I thank you, sir," he said, feeling truly penitent for the first time in his life. Meanwhile, in the depths of space. The lone white ball of energy hurtles through the vast expanse of the northern galaxy, landing several solar systems away from the position of New Namek. As the ball of energy loses its momentum, a clearly defined Arcosian shape formed a lone metacooler, slightly different than all the other models due to the royal purple sheen of its armor. "DHH," the machine growled out as the white aura left his metal body. "Curse Frieza, he destroyed the big Jeet star. Good thing I had this prototype body in storage and managed to upload my consciousness into it at the last moment," Cooler mused aloud. While this new body looked to be a representation of Cooler's fourth form, it was in fact stronger than any of the other metacooler bodies that the big Jeet star had produced. The only problem was, now he lacked the evolutionary powers of the big Jeet star. Just need to find somewhere to land. As he said this, he cast his gaze to nearby planets, and his eyes settled on one black mass of a planetoid, covered in plumes of crimson smoke. It was moving straight toward Cooler. Well, he certainly wouldn't back down, and he did want to investigate this bizarre-looking moon. With no Kai signature to detect, the purple metacooler started flying toward the dark planetoid, and suddenly he saw some sort of hulking thing heading toward him. It was rather tall and muscular, and the gems lodged in various body parts shimmered against the light of Cooler's aura. Faster than Cooler expected, the creature closed the distance and slammed a monster's fist into Cooler's jaw, causing the Arcosian android to give a strangled gasp of agony, his thorax being warped out of shape by the blow. "Trespasser," the hulking giant snarled, his red skin shimmering like metal. Before Cooler could respond, the creature's pointed skull slammed into his own with a powerful headbutt which could have almost taken Cooler's head off. The savage machine raised a hand up, forming a green Kai sphere, which was no doubt intended to be his coup de grace. A voice called out, "Halt Hachiyak," the Kai ball dispersed, and the scarlet monster let his hands rest at his sides. From behind Hachiyak, Cooler saw a strange blue humanoid appear. His eyes were mismatched red and white, he had a grey bushy beard and mustache, and was wearing an alien white and green lab coat. Such an interesting machine. He can surely be of use to us once he's been. The humanoid stroked his grey mustache and gave a grin. Reprogrammed. The Tuffle capital city of Pil was a large city, a metropolis of tall white buildings on streets structured in a very orderly fashion. The Tuffle commuters went about their business on the streets and in their hovercars. That was how every city was on the Tuffle hemisphere of Planet Plant, a well-structured, well-maintained and orderly city of technological advancement, the polar opposite of the savage, poorly built excuses for villages that the Saiyans had constructed for himself. It is currently age 719, little under a year until the beginning of the Saiyan-Tuffle conflict. Deep within the capital of Pil sat a large white compound, the lab of the most revered of all Tuffle scientists. Raichi adjusted the green collar at the top of his white lab coat and walked through the pristine corridors of his lab, adjusting the bushy white mustache covering Huss' wrinkled upper lip, his half-lidded eyes affectionately admiring some of the works in progress he had been making. It was while examining the inventions that surrounded him that his young assistant man came rushing in late again, his light blue lab coat fluttering behind him. So sorry I'm late again. The Peace Force have been putting up more checks as of late, what with the talk of Saiyan terrorists, the young scientist said, running his gloved fingers through his sandy hair. Raichi gave a small scoff. Saiyan terrorists, honestly, a man, you shouldn't listen to such nonsense. The Saiyans are our neighbors. True, they can be a little brutish, but they were brought here from an entirely different planet, and while they may be too proud to accept the help of the Tuffles, we still need to respect them. The older scientist explained, strolling over to one red machine, large tubes on the ground around it. A gas dispenser, initially intended to release airborne vaccinations. The Tuffle King wanted it for other purposes. But sir, they attacked another border town, raided food and supplies from there, a man stammered out, walking across the room, and it's not just that, they say that there's some tribe leader that's gathering the other tribes under his rule. King Vegeta, I believe he's called. A man remarked, crouching beside the gas machine. Nonsense. Raichi insisted, pawing around for a plasma cutter. Now be a dear and wake Hachiyak up, I need to check to see if his AI has undergone any developments. He added. At this, the lab assistant nodded and walked off to another part of the compound. Now where is that damned plasma cutter? There was a small chirping sound beside him, and Raichi turned his head to see a 3-foot green plant-like creature, holding the plasma cutter in its black crab-like feelers. Ah, thank you, Serverman. He said, patting the short creature on its green bulb-shaped skull, earning a happy chirp from the green creature before it padded off across the room. Raichi spent a few minutes cutting and welding on the gas dispenser, adjusting its filters and its wiring, when he heard several voices coming from behind him. Turning, the old man's wrinkled features formed a smile when he saw his son and his two grandchildren, a son and daughter, walking up the corridors. "Hi Dad," the auburn-haired Tuffle called out, his purple glasses shimmering slightly in the artificial lighting. "Grandpa," the two children squealed in unison, rushing over and hugging the aging scientist, earning laughs from Raichi. "Haha, oh mice, Hive, calm down. I'm not as spry as used to be," Raichi said, giving each of his grandchildren a hug. He glanced to his son then so Armil, "What brings you here?" Raichi asked, standing up fully and fixing his back. "Well, it's Armil," began, pausing and scratching the back of his neck in an awkward fashion. "To be honest, it's something I'd rather talk to you without the children in the room," he concluded, which earned quizzical looks from Mice and Hive. Raichi gave a small nod of understanding. Well, Hachiuk should be awake, so he was cut short by light clanking footsteps and turned to see a child-sized red robot with an innocent smile on its youthful face. "Hi doctor," he greeted, giving a small wave and then waving to Mice and Hive. "Ah, Hachiuk, only a prototype at this stage. A supercomputer designed to monitor events all across planet Plant and being able to produce a physical avatar to protect itself if need be. I connected to 5 cities when I woke up this morning," Hachiuk said, pride in his voice. Raichi gave him an affectionate pat on the gem in his skull. "Good boy. Run along and play with Mice and Hive," he instructed. Hachiuk gave a nod and the trio dashed off down the halls, giggling and laughing. Raichi's expression became serious once they were gone and he looked to his son. "So, what is the problem?" he asked. Armil gave a small sigh and rubbed his brow. "I suppose it's all this talk of war between the Saiyans and our race. Well, my family don't live too close to the border. One stray energy blast could, well, it's not something I really want to think about," he admitted, looking like a small child before his father. Raichi gave a small tsk and shook his head in a dismissive fashion, finding this talk of war growing ever more tedious to hear. "Things will be fine, my boy. Just so long as the Tuffle King doesn't bait the Saiyans or make a big deal out of a bunch or troublemakers," Raichi assured the boy. The young man was no scientist, an architect who oversaw construction in his own city, so it fell to Raichi to assure his safety. "Just trust me. There will be no war." Page 721, 1 year after the official outbreak of war between the Saiyans and the Tuffles. "The man, adjust the concentration in the nutrient paste," Raichi said, his gaze never looking away from the dirt-filled test chamber where several plant-like creatures were growing from like vicious sprouts. "The Tuffle King, Lord Bibi, has tasked Raichi with creating mass-produced warriors who could aid on the battlefield and utilize the same Kai powers that the Saiyans could tap into." Thus, Raichi had modified his old Servermen into the more vicious Sabermen or Cybermen, as the Saiyans falsely pronounced them. While the Servermen were never designed to be attractive, the Sabermen were truly grotesque creatures. Their pincers had been rapliced with sharp talon hands, their heads were taller to account for the acid pouch, their eyes had a sickly pink in color. They had more toned muscles and some natural body armor that could allow them to survive. Alone they were as strong as a low-class Saiyan, but their true strength came in numbers. "Still no acceleration in growth, doctor," a man remarked, seeing the Sabermen sprouting up at the same rate. Raichi gave an annoyed sigh and ran fingers through his gray mane of hair and then he turned and headed to a different part of the lab. A man followed without a word. "We'll perfect the growth formula in time, though knowing our luck, it will be after peace is declared," Raichi lamented, giving a soft chuckle as they entered the Destron gas test chamber. "Peace, doctor. They say that now that the Saiyans have won a few skirmishes, they won't stop until either their race is dead or ours is," a man replied. Raichi gave a small tut. "Have some faith, a man, while our races have not always been good friends, the Saiyans do owe us. It was, after all, us who sent our ships out to save them from that golden grade ape that destroyed their home planet. Expecting gratitude from a Saiyan is like expecting blood from a stone," a man remarked, browsing the chemical equation of Destron gas that Raichi had drawn up on the board. "Still, once the Destron gas is completed, they'll slink back to their own hemisphere with their monkey tails between their legs," he added. The gas was intended to be a peaceful resolution to the war. The current equation created a gas that Tuffles were immune to but would sterilize the Saiyans. Were they to agree to call off all hostilities, the Tuffles would devise and produce an antidote for the Saiyans. Bibi had turned the offer down, citing that the Saiyans' long lifespans meant they could fight for generations and cause massive damage to the Tuffle hemisphere. He demanded a chemical weapon which could kill Saiyans en masse, and while that was a trivial matter for a scientist such as Raichi, he was still reluctant. "Have faith, a man," Raichi said, stacking vials of chemical samples on one table. "I know I do." Page 725, the Saiyan-Tuffle war has lasted for 5 straight years, in a tense war of attrition. Raichi quietly labored on the new mechanical body of Hachiuk, linking up circuits and wires that would allow for the distribution of Kai. This new body was hulking compared to the child that had been the prototype Hachiuk. At the very least, Hachiuk was now 2 feet taller than Raichi himself. The old man's appearance was getting scruffier. He had so little time to maintain his appearance, now that he spent so much time working on perfecting the Saberman, the Destron gas and Hachiuk's new avatar. Now not only did he have a bushy gray mustache, but a wild beard of silver was growing on his chin. His work on Hachiuk's new body was becoming a bit of a priority for Raichi, now that his paranoia was growing. Fear that if the Saiyans reached the capital, his life's work would have no way to defend itself. This body had such grand potential even if it was far from completion, only his head and upper torso currently complete, the key problem was a power source. It eluded Raichi greatly, and he had many restless nights wondering how to empower such a mighty machine. "Doctor?" A man greeted as he walked in from the Destron chamber, his hands folded behind his back. "Grave news, I'm afraid. The Saiyans have broken through on the western frontier and razed one city to the ground," he explained. Raichi's eyes widened in worry. Armil and his family were close to the western frontier, and even though he spoke with Armil earlier that day, he knew the Saiyans could get closer any day now. "It will be fine," Raichi replied, looking up from Hachiuk and lifting his goggles off his eyes. "Peace will come," he added, though there was a distinct hint of doubt in his voice. "Any other news?" he asked, desperate to change the subject right now. The man pursed his lips and thought, well, they say that this King Vegeta is now telling his subjects to pray for a full moon. "Why, I cannot say," he said. Well, that was very odd. The lunar cycle on Planet Plant was erratic to say the least, and he could recall any full moons happening as long as the Saiyans had lived here. "I see. Well, let's keep working on Hachiuk. I hope to complete his arms within a fortnight," Raichi remarked as he pulled his goggles down and got back to work. Page 727, in 3 years' time the war will be over. Raichi lightly tapped the console bank before him, while his eyes glowered down at a chained Saiyan in the test chamber, a gas dispenser right before the dark-haired monkey man who was clad in a tunic of bestial furs. He was kept in place by a high-gravity field and Kai-sapping manacles, and his grunts of anger and discomfort would almost make Raichi smile. He had asked a test on this captive specifically, the one who had been detained by Saberman before he could flee the city he destroyed. "I wouldn't struggle so much were I you, my dim-witted monkey friend. A touch of these buttons, and I could reduce you to a stain on the floor, like a squashed insect," Raichi growled. The Saiyan gave an animalistic growl and looked up to Raichi, a few messy black bangs going over his face. "So why don't you?" he asked through heaving breaths of exertion. "You disgusting old tufflefuck," he spat. "Because," Raichi said, walking to another console and flicking another switch which caused the gas dispenser to cough and rumble to life. "Then I wouldn't be able to do this," he snarled, pushing another button and causing purple gas to spew from the 3 conical orifices, quickly filling the airtight chamber. Raichi watched with unblinking eyes as the savage Saiyan choked and sputtered in agony, all strength being sapped from his body and leaving him paralyzed as his body quickly decayed from the inside out. As he was a low-class warrior, it was over quickly, and he laid in the smoke-filled chamber as a pile of blood and bone and sludge. With another push the chamber was drained of the Destron gas, and 2 servermen slowly entered to clean up the mess left behind with acid and scrubbers. Dr. Yu, a man trailed off and looked to his mentor with fearful eyes. "I perfected the Destron gas as a killing agent. The stronger the target the longer the decay will take, but it still works," Raichi remarked. "I suppose you are shocked by my current disposition, aren't you, a man?" the Tuffle asked, earning a slow nod from his kinsman. "The city that ape helped destroy was Armel's home," he said flatly. "My son, his wife, my grandchildren are all dead," he added, clenching his gloved fists. "And I am as much to blame because I was foolish enough to believe in peace and drag my feet in the development of the Destron gas," he spat, anger rising rapidly. "Well, no more. We Tuffles tried to help the Saiyans, but they repaid our kindness with death and destruction. I will never forgive them for what they've done for us, even if God himself does." Tears formed in the doctor's weary eyes. "I vow to eradicate every Saiyan in the universe." Page 728. In 2 years' time, the Tuffles on Planet Plant will be no more. Quietly took a seat in a large desk chair, wearing a dusty brown tunic, cream slacks and black boots. His wrinkled hands reached across a desk and took hold of a strange headband, linked to a large computer by several wires, and slipped it onto his wrinkled brow. His grooming had become non-existent, a large scruffy beard ran down from his chin along with a large mustache, and his gray hair ran down to his shoulders. His eyes looked more weary now than they ever had in their entire life, and they looked as if all the life they had once held were gone completely. But the push of a button on the monitor before him, a holographic recording began. "This is the journal of A full moon looms, and from my research, it seems it will hit the planet in 2 years' time. If this will somehow give the Saiyans an advantage and leads to my death, I have decided that I will leave some traces of myself to help win the war against the Saiyan menace." Raichi began, staring straight into the recorder. I have altered Hachiek's mental functions to make him more of a fighter than a thinker, to work better with his goal of killing the Saiyan race. However, due to this he needs someone to direct him and issue orders. Thus, I have made preparations to have a second AI added to the supercomputer Ghost of Me. Raichi explained into the recorder, quietly netting his gloved hands in his lap. He coughed into his fist and then continued his recording using some relatively new technology. I have been able to mimic my brainwaves. He said, tapping the headband on his chest. This ghost Raichi will issue commands, and Hachiek will follow them, as he is programmed to follow the orders of anyone he believes to be me. Raichi remarked, his weary eyes darting to the computer for a moment to check the upload progress. I believe that I have also solved the problem in regards to powering Hachiek, finding a power source that is rather abundant on planet Plant right now. He trailed off, as if trying to build some sort of dramatic tension hatred of the Saiyans. He released a low sigh. It's still in an early stage of development, but I believe I can use Hachiek's energy tanks to absorb the Tuffle's hatred of the Saiyans and then gradually process it into Kai. While it would take a fair bit to power Hachiek's physical avatar, there is no short of hatred right now. Raichi glowered into the camera. Then I will kill every Saiyan. Even if I have to do it posthumously. Age 730. The full moon has risen and the Tuffles on planet Plant face their end. Raichi quietly stared through the viewport of his lab, seeing the distant orange explosions and hazes of fire, which lit up the night in tandem with the glowing full moon in the sky. The Saiyans had prayed for this full moon, and it had come to them, somehow turning them into giant apes, so powerful that they were steamrolling across the Tuffle hemisphere, marching ever closer to the city of Pill. None of their weapons could hurt them, and due to their sheer size, they were above the plumes of purple gas that the prototype gas dispensers could emit. In an obvious fashion, the destruction and the futility of the Tuffle's last stand was horrific, and yet Raichi couldn't help but see a sort of beauty in the steadily encroaching orange blaze. "Doctor, I'm leaving," a man said, walking into the darkened chamber, his shadow marking the light of the doorway. "They say that this really is the end of our race, save for distant space teams." He added, fear and sorrow evident in his voice. Raichi didn't turn from the window. "So to that end I'm going to go home and spend what little time I have left with my family." "Lucky you," Raichi replied, folding his gloved hands behind his back. "Go, man. I have a war to fight," he added, illuminating the room to reveal the green and golden Hachiek supercomputer. It was a curved golden pedestal with a green glass tube atop it. The top of it looked vaguely like a golden mushroom cap. "Oh?" Raichi told his assistant, giving a small nod. A man nodded in response and jogged off. It was the last time he'd ever see his assistant alive. The rumbling and earth-shaking power of the Azaru's footsteps grew gradually closer, but Raichi didn't stop his work for even a nanosecond. Hachiek's propulsion systems were working now, but he still couldn't form his physical avatar, not while it still had to process the energy that all the Tuffle's hatred was giving him. He'd spend some time in a hibernation period, which was why getting him off plant was Raichi's greatest concerns. Raichi took a step back and examined the full beauty of his life's work. "It's finally finished, my mighty supercomputer. Hachiek, drink deep of our hatred of the Saiyans. Hachiek," he growled, watching with bloodshot eyes. He dashed over and started ascending the ladder, hoping to launch the computer and stay safe in its force field as it escaped into space. Fate had other plans. Suddenly an explosion rocked the compound and knocked Raichi off the ladder. With what strength he had left to muster, Raichi gave a grunt and slammed his palm into the launch button before falling and landing flat on his back. "Oh Hachiek, one day you will show the Saiyans," he trailed off, hearing the hum and glow of the green gems on the supercomputer, and a grin crossed his face as Hachiek started to absorb the hatred of the Tuffles, both alive and dead. Purple wisps of energy were sucked into the machine, causing the whole thing to briefly flash. Purple Befrit flew up through the roof of Raichi's lab, dodging the slow mouth blasts of the great apes and rapidly escaping into outer space. The Azaru loomed over the bombed-out remnants of Raichi's lab. He smirked at his foes and stared up at the full moon. Despite being the instrument of the Tuffle's demise, it was such a beautiful and rare thing to behold. Raichi shut his eyes slowly in smug contentment as the shadow of a giant foot crashed down on him. "You will show the Saiyans the extent of our hatred." Age 735, 5 years after the Saiyan-Tuffle War. In his earlier years, Raichi's studies of space had allowed him to see a very distant, yet incredibly safe, planet with a thin atmosphere. He had planned to have the Hachiek supercomputer land there so that it could hibernate in peace. Once it landed on the dark planet as Raichi had called it, even though he knew full well it was more like a moon in size, the supercomputer started creating servermen who proceeded to build a mechanical fortress around it, and once that was done, the servermen began to develop new and more advanced gas dispensers, using blueprints that had been implanted in their minds. It had all been planned out by Raichi before his death, and it is almost sad that planet Vegeta's destruction would come in only age 737. Age 761. With the Saiyan genocide, hatred of their race has grown to a very limited degree due to an obvious lack in Saiyan activity, save for the rampages of Nappa, Vegeta and Raditz. The supercomputer, now surrounded by a full fortress, had absorbed enough energy to run the Raichi AI, but alas, it couldn't fully empower the physical avatar of Hachiuk. It was a conundrum that the ghost of Raichi was having trouble resolving. Hatred of the Saiyans is the power source his creator intended for powering Hachiuk's physical avatar, but because of this Frieza person, the Saiyans have been reduced to a small group. So how would he acquire the necessary Kai? He supposed siphoning it off from living targets was the most obvious one, he could hardly just invade planets and take natives captive. The servermen were hardly fighters, and if Raichi were to draw too much attention to himself, well, his quest for revenge would be over too quickly. Thus, Raichi had dispatched video probes across the North Galaxy in an attempt to find a suitable guise for the siphoning of energy. It had to be something that could draw people in, but not to the point where there would be potential threats investigating the dark planet and posing a threat to Hachiuk. The Raichi AI was capable of browsing through hundreds of hours of recorded footage from those probes in the span of minutes, and it was then that the idea, while examining one world dominated by religion, that the idea of how to effectively siphon energy came to him. The cult. The blue-skinned facsimile murmured to himself, his mismatched eyes slowly glancing toward the main body of the Hachiuk supercomputer. Yes, that idea will do nicely. He mused, sending a quick telepathic message to the servermen. They had so many things to do now: indoctrinate preachers, build energy-absorbing shrines, and plant these temples on suitable worlds. I believe I'll call it the Order of Lord Hacha. Oh, that sounds good, the simple-minded peons will just love that. Raichi remarked, a wry grin crossing his face. Age 766. The Order of Hacha had spread quite far across the North Galaxy, and the gradual absorption of energy from worshippers had done a great deal to empower Hachiuk. He could form and power up his physical avatar now, but unfortunately he still could not tap into his full power. But now Raichi had another powerful warrior on his side, a new agent provocateur. The strange metal lizard who Hachiuk had very nearly killed. Raichi loomed over the operating table where the servermen were busily making upgrades and repairs on his purple metallic body, installing lime green gems into his chest cavity, his forehead and his wrist guards. The power siphoning gems, which would be how this trespasser would make himself useful. He had taken some sense of glee in twisting and messing with this android's original mind before sealing it away inside its memory banks and replacing it with an AI akin to Hachiuk's own, utterly obedient when it came to following Raichi's orders and ruthless in combat. The Tuffle AI watched as the serverman modified that purple armor in a more cosmetic sense, engraving him with ornate carvings, and modified his eyes into two glowing golden slits, and then attached two deployable Kai blades to his wrist guards. The ghost of Raichi turned his mismatched eyes to the video monitors, viewing some memories that stood out to him. Going by his memories, this Frieza fellow had a Saiyan with him. Saiyan Hachiuk growled, clenching and unclenching his giant fist. Even the word could pique the machine's anger. Now Hachiuk, you'll get your time to shine, Raichi reminded him, but it will be a good chance for our new ally's abilities, and once his upgrades are complete, he will be capable of draining the energy from the others. Then you will be at 100% power, and our journey to the Saiyan remnants on Earth can begin. There was a sudden beeping within the fortress, and Hachiuk's face twisted with rage. Trespassers, he growled, looking to the video monitors which showed a strange cylindrical, almost tower-like spaceship moving through the same solar system as the dark planet. The strange thing that the leaders of both of these crafts would never know was that they both quested after the energy which could empower their monsters. How unfortunate for them. Kill them. The Raichi AI remarked, glancing at Hachiuk, who gave a solemn nod in response. Hachiuk's crimson body was briefly illuminated lime green by his Kai, and he flew like a rocket toward the tower-like spaceship. He could detect 3 power levels within it, Dabura Pui Pui and Yakin, unbeknownst to Hachiuk. He felt stronger than all of them, even at only roughly 75% power. As he drew closer to the craft though, a black and red Kai orb came flying at Hachiuk. His gold eyes narrows, and he could see some sort of demonic humanoid in an open doorway. He wasn't moving out into space, so he either had great confidence in his power, or he couldn't survive in space like Hachiuk could. Hachiuk launched a bright green Kai blast at the demon strike, and the two bolts collided. There was a highly volatile reaction between the two, and a massive explosion formed from the collision, briefly illuminating the blackness of space with wonderful fireworks. With no Kai signature to detect, Hachiuk was able to rapidly whip around to the other side of the tower-like spaceship, whereupon the red giant rapidly spammed green and black Kai blasts, blowing massive chunks out of the craft. The Tuffle android grinned wickedly as he saw the remains of the crew members adrift in space. The more powerful crew members, as the AI predicted, could not survive in the vacuum and were gradually dying off. But Babidi dead, the quest to revive Majin Buu was no more. Okay, so explain it to me again, Inyan said, plucking some strands of food from her teeth and propping her feet up on dinner table. With all the discarded plates filled with tiny leftover bits of food on the table, it was practically heaving and groaning under the weight. Where we heading to Earth now? We just gotta dick around for a little while and then get the wish from the dragon. The ebony Scionus had been returned to the waking world a few hours after Frieza made his pact with the Namekian elder, though Frieza omitted any mention of his tears. Frieza gave a small sigh as he used his mind to levitate the dishes to the washing robot because Inyan, this is a matter of pride. He said we are rather close to Earth at this stage, we can head there and avenge my father, and then by the time we reach Namek their Dragon Balls will be free for our use. The former prince added. Though, as more repressed memories of his father resurfaced, the less he was sure about avenging him. Huh. Inyan said, flicking something off her finger across the kitchen, maybe while we're there we can snag the Earth Dragon Balls and get a wish from them. She suggested. My, that's actually not a bad idea, Inyan. Frieza replied, a look of mild surprise on his youthful face. The Inyan chuckled, grinning and placing her hands behind her head. Well, people often think I'm stupid and all that, but I have my brief flashes of condensation. Inspiration. Frieza corrected. What? Inyan asked flatly, tilting her head to the side like a curious dog. Frieza gave a small growl of annoyance, pinched the bridge of his white nose, and shook his head. A useful ally as she was, Inyan's intellect could often match that of a spanner. In any event. Frieza said, clasping his hands behind the small of his back and slowly swishing his tail, we will need to make another supply run given the amount of food that you just wolfed down. Thankfully, that Zolshan had told us of a useful port planet called Essos. Frieza remarked. That fellow, the green-eyed frog named Darmaker. He had told Frieza of this small port town and how things were cheap there, but he also warned of a small trail of destruction an unknown force had left in that area of the North Galaxy. Not that such stories frightened the former ruler of the galaxy. Frieza gave a small hum and looked up once he felt the rumble of the Shatterstar, the purple diamond craft exiting hyperspace. The Arcosian quietly walked over to one viewport in the kitchen to catch a glimpse of Essos. His eyes widened at the sight. Large patches of the planet were ablaze with massive orange plumes, so large that even the naked eye could see it from space. Set us down mid-gyro. Frieza ordered through the intercom of the Shatterstar, I want to get to the bottom of this. Meanwhile, on Earth. When Launch and Tien had first started living together, the blonde Launch had expressed her displeasure in the fact that they were constantly moving from place to place. At the very least they could try living somewhere more populated. Tien, in response, had been adamant in that he didn't want to be living in a big city. Thus they compromised and moved to Binbuku Island, an average-sized island community. Tien's income while living here had been through work as a sort of lawman for the island, and Launch's income had been years of ill-gotten gains that Tien was unaware of. On this day, Tien, Yamcha, Krillin and Chiaotzu were gathered in a more deserted part of the island. Well, I think I've hit the limit of what we can do with Kaioken. The Triclops remarked with a small sigh, earning curious looks from his comrades. They had all been practicing heavily with the technique King Kai had taught them, to the point where they could tap into the well of power at will, without need to say the word. What do you mean by limit? The scar-faced bandit Yamcha asked, running a hand through his clipped short ebony hair. I mean, that near as I can tell I've trained myself to my physical limit, and past a certain point my body can't adapt to the strain of a Kaioken power multiplier. Tien replied with a low sigh. Just check this out. He added, taking a small inhale through his nose. Tien quietly entered his crane school stance, steadying his whole body. For several moments there was naught but silence, until suddenly the ground beneath Tien's feet started to quake, forcing the other human fighters to stumble backward in shock. The Triclops' muscles rippled and his veins popped to the surface of his skin. His crimson aura flared up, smashing the earth beneath him. All three of Tien's eyes were glowing bright white and he clenched his teeth in pain as the power racked his body with pain. Tien, stop, that's too much power for your body to handle, Krillin yelled, taking worried steps backward. Tien either didn't hear him or just ignored him. The Triclops pulled one arm back and took aim at a large distant rock formation and then gave a loud yell as his fist shot out. The shockwave behind the blow carved a massive trench in the rocky earth as it headed toward the rock formation. It hit the distant mound and caused it to explode into a massive plume of dust on impact, shooting large shards of rock into the blue sky above them. Tien's aura left him and he stumbled back with a weak groan from the exertion, landing flat on his ass. God, that was a times 60 Kaioken boost. As you can tell, the strength boost is massive, but the after effect makes it too costly to be practical. Holy shit, Yamcha murmured in disbelief, his eyes still transfixed on the slowly fading plume of dust and smoke that Tien's attack had caused. So if that's the limit of Kaioken, what are we supposed to do? That technique was the only way we could keep up with Goku's Super Saiyan transformation. the bandit remarked. Yen spent a few moments catching his breath and then wiped the sweat from his brow before responding, "We're martial artists, we make a new and better technique," he said simply. Krillin gave a nervous laugh and scratched the side of his bald head. "Don't know how to tell you this, man, but we don't have all that much time to make a new technique. We only have a few months until the day the androids are supposed to turn up," the monk remarked. Before Tien could reply, he glanced to a nearby hill to see blue-haired Launch jogging toward the group. "Are you guys okay? I saw the huge explosion and I came as quickly as I could," she asked, her eyes shining with innocence and her chest heaving with labored breaths. "It's fine, just showing the guys an attack I've been working on," Tien assured the blue-haired woman. He had grown to love both halves of Launch's mind, the loving and innocent blue-haired side and the fiery hellcat that was her blonde-haired side. He got to his feet, looming over his girlfriend in height, and planted a small peck on her forehead. "You worry too much." Launch's pretty face turned slightly pink and a bashful smile graced her lips. "I can't help but worry. You died on me once, after all," she replied, causing Tien to feel slightly guilty. "Don't be like that, okay? I'm heading back to the house. Try not to hurt yourself now," the blue-haired woman said, giving a small nod and dashing off. Tien was smiling warmly at his departing lover before glancing over at Yamcha and noticing the grimace on the bandit's face as he stared at the ground. He then recalled his former rival's heartbreak. "Oh, wow, Yamcha, I'm sorry, man." "No, it's fine, really," Yamcha lied, looking up and forcing a smile to the other human warriors. I figured Bulma and I would break up eventually, but that's now why it sucks so much. Of all the people she could have left me for, why him? Why Vegeta?" The scar-faced bandit spat that name with so much venom that it was almost a little worrying. "The spiky-haired bastard who had his goons kill me, the monster that was going to burn our planet to cinders. Why him? I wish I could tell ya, man," Krillin remarked, scratching his neck in an awkward fashion. "Look, you'll get someone else soon enough, I promise, but right now we have training to do," the monk added, walking over and giving Yamcha a small pat on the back. Yamcha gave a weary sigh and a small exhale. Right. Yeah, let's get ready to kick some android ass. I'm sensing several power levels down that way. Well, that or it's just one ginormous power level," Indian remarked as she and Frieza flew side by side from the Shatterstar's landing site to the nearby bombed-out city. Definitely a few people involved in the battle, going by the scattered explosions," Frieza remarked. Right now he was only using 25% of his fourth form's power. "Come on. We'll clear up this sordid mess and see what supplies we can gather amidst the ruins," he said, his purple aura flashing and boosting Frieza's flying speed. Indian followed suit. Indeed, once they drew close to the city, several aliens burst from the smoke to accost them. They were odd, wearing identical suits of armor with no symbols upon them that Frieza could recognize. Their armor was a purple shade from head to toe, save for the glass visor that covered their faces, which was a ruby red in shade. While they had numbers, they posed little threat. Frieza wrapped the 3 digits of his left foot around the skull of one approaching soldier and crushed his skull like an eggshell. His tail lashed to one side and sent one enemy soldier spiraling out of the air and crashing into a ruined husk of a building, and finally he launched a death beam which pierced the stomachs of 2 soldiers, letting their lifeless bodies fall to the smashed city streets below them. While Frieza was being ruthless and efficient, Indian was having a whale of a time with the slaughter of attackers. Most likely this was deja vu from her days in the Saiyan army, cleansing planets for Frieza. She gave a joyous yell as she punched one trooper's head clean off his shoulders, followed by a rapid roundhouse kick which launched 2 soldiers across the sky like brutalized ragdolls. The muscular female tore one soldier's arm off and started cackling wildly as she flailed it around like a fleshy club, shouting arm kill whenever she landed a lethal blow. Which was surprisingly often. Suddenly Frieza heard a yell from behind him and he turned his head to see one of the purple-armored soldiers div-bombing toward him with a Kai blade on one hand. "Die Frieza, die." But then, just as suddenly as the soldier appeared, he was enveloped by jade fires, causing the soldier to give a dying scream as his very atoms were burnt away by the strange flames. Frieza cast his gaze to the source of the emerald fires to see a rather tall-headed humanoid. He was clad in odd attire, a white tunic with matching gloves and boot over a black guy. The Arcosian prince couldn't make out the species of his attacker because his face was concealed by dusty brown face wrappings. "I wouldn't focus my attention on the small fries, were I you," the stranger remarked. He stood up fully, a little over 7 foot, much to Frieza's shock. "Big fish is on his way right now," he added. "Big fish?" Frieza murmured, "and just what do you mean by th?" The former tyrant was cut short by a massive explosion which rocked the ruined city. From the ash and dust a tall figure, almost as tall as the stranger with the green fire, arose into the soot-filled sky. He was somewhat wiry in build, covered in sinews of muscle. His hair spiked up, and Frieza would have thought this scowling young man a Super Saiyan were it not for the fact that his hair glowed blue in shade. He wore a red sash around his waist and had baggy white trousers, topped off by gold boots and gauntlets and a matching headband on his brow. "Who is that, Frieza?" asked the stranger, trying to get a reading on this newcomer's Kai. His scouters simply couldn't process all that energy though. "The monster." The stranger spat, re-entering his fighting stance and forming a crackling orb of jade fire on one gloved hand, the same one who has been raining death on planets in this quadrant of the galaxy. He added. This was a detail that surprised Frieza. He had expected the army had been the cause of all this destruction, but for one individual, well, it was impressive. Inian paused mid-rampage and stared at the stranger, surprised by his Kai like Frieza had been. Then, like a rocket, he flew forth and drop-kicked Inian through the cracked roads. "DCH, come on, stranger, we needs to beat him," Frieza yelled, dashing forth and trying to land a punch on the lanky stranger's face. The blue-haired young man's arm shot up and blocked the punch with minimal effort, while Frieza winced from the impact. It was like trying to punch a slab of granite. The super warrior spun rapidly and gave a primal roar, smashing Frieza in the jaw with the back of his knuckle and hitting him clean through two buildings which collapsed into rubble once Frieza hit through them. The stranger dashed toward the blue-haired warrior and seemed a bit more successful in his assault, knocking the strange blue-haired fighter back several meters with his flurries of punches and kicks, a spark of green fire flying off his fists upon each impact. Still, he too was sent hurtling away by a quick elbow to the ribs. Inian burst forth then with a primal shriek, smashing her knuckles into the lanky warrior's cheek. The force was such that it caused the male's eyes to bulge out of his head, the pain of a few cracked teeth hitting him. Frieza flew in next, having powered up to 60% of his power, and buried his knee into the glowing blue-haired warrior's lower back, which caused the stranger to give the first growl of pain that Frieza had heard from him. Frieza and Inian struck in unison then, their knees smashing the lanky abomination in the face and sending him soaring about a dozen meters away before he corrected himself. Then the blue-haired warrior was struck in the side by an equally blue Kai beam, which drove him into the earth and kicked up a powerful explosion. "I was aware he'd be coming here and I had been training for his arrival, but he's beyond what I expected," the strange in the black dogi remarked, giving some measured breaths. "You a native then?" Inian asked. It wasn't impossible, they had hardly seen anything else here that could have been a native. "Yes and no." The masked stranger replied casually, his eyes scanning for their super-powered foe. "What the hell does that even me?" Inian's question was cut short by an ear-splitting roar and a shockwave that blew away several of the decimated buildings. "Q quick, Frieza, we need to transform," Inian said frantically as the blue-haired warrior flew from the smoke, an enraged expression on his bruised face. Before either warrior could transform, they were struck by powerful clothesline attacks. Whoever this guy was, his arms packed the punch of a freight train. Before Frieza and Inian could make a counterattack, the lanky blue-haired warrior clutched them both by the arms and spun them around several times before releasing his grip and sending the two hurtling to the ground, making a large crater on impact. Without missing a beat, the superhuman planet killer pulled one arm back and formed a green Kai ball in his palm, which he promptly flung at the downed warriors. With no time to dodge or even block, he and Inian were blasted across the husk of a city by the white-hot explosion. Frieza gave a strangled gasp of pain and shoved a massive chunk of debris off his back. He could feel blood trickle down from his nostrils and then noted a few black burns on his once ivory skin. With a quick glance to his side, Frieza spotted Inian sprawled face down on one large debris chunk, the slow rhythmic rising and falling of her chest. She was alive right now. The former prince looked up to see the hooded warrior throwing rapid and skillful kicks at the blue-haired warrior, and while he landed a few good hits, he was soon caught off guard by a savage punch from the blue-haired warrior, causing the hooded fighter to stumble back. The giant gripped the other warrior's skull with one hand and then started laughing maniacally as he divvied him toward the ground, smashing the hooded fighter into the ground with such force that it rended the earth apart and sent Frieza and the unconscious Inian back even further. A weak groan escaped his lips as the injured Klaoked warrior was dumped before him, and when Frieza looked up, he could see the blue-haired warrior forming a green Kai orb in his hand. Then suddenly the strange lanky warrior tensed and seemed to be racked with intense pain, the gem on his crown glowing. "That's enough, Broly," a distinctly masculine voice called out. From behind this Broly, Frieza could see a one-eyed Saiyan holding out a glowing gold ring, which seemed connected to the crown. "So the rumors are true, Lord Frieza is alive, and he's acting as some sort of defender of the people. How humorous." The Saiyan male remarked, stroking his beard with his other hand. "Knock them out, Broly. I want Frieza and his allies present when we obtain our final victory." At his command, the lanky boy, who was apparently a Saiyan too, pulled his fist back and knocked Frieza out cold when the blow struck him. When Frieza woke, he felt a strong pain rack his body and very quickly realized there was some sort of metal disc digging into his brow. He felt weak and he couldn't seem to summon any Kai at all, nor could he draw on his potent telekinetic abilities. "I wouldn't try to remove the crown were I you. It shocks you," a familiar voice remarked. Through blurred vision, Frieza could see the one addressing him was the masked individual from Essos who had helped fight against the blue-haired warrior, Broly. The tall being was currently undoing the wrappings on his face and his features gradually became more visible. When his vision cleared completely, Frieza's eyes widened in shock at a realization at who this stranger was. The masked warrior from Essos was an Namekian. "Call me Slack," he said, extending a gloved hand out to Frieza. It was then that Frieza realized Slack also had a gold crown on his brow to suppress his own energy. His face was long and gaunt and he had a few wrinkles forming on his olive-drab skin. He wore 2 silver earrings on his elf-like ears which were like tiny silver pyramids linked to his ears by 2 beads. Frieza slowly reached out and shook Slack's hand before remarking, "I don't understand, Namekians don't have any spacecraft," he remarked. Slack gave a nod, "The modern Namekians that you have encountered lack such technology. But before the great storms that threatened to destroy all of Namek it was almost 400 years ago," the tall Namekian mused. Records do say that the planet was prone to violent weather shifts," Frieza remarked. His eyes shot up, "But wait a moment, how does a Namekian grow so powerful?" he asked. Slack, going by the prowess he had shown against Broly, could have defeated Frieza handily during his invasion of Namek. "You're wondering why I wasn't on Namek to stop you?" he asked, raising a brow. "I was only aware of what happened after the planet's destruction. Have no fear, I want no revenge. I've also heard how you saved the new planet Namek and that makes up for your crimes to my kind in my eyes. But I digress. My father was one of the last Namekian shamans when the great storms began. He had taken me, only an egg at the time, aboard his spacecraft and the 2 of us fled from Namek until we reached Essos," he began. "So, for the next few hundred years, my father taught me all his mystical knowledge and taught me how to fight so that I could help in the defense of our new home," Slack added, shifting uncomfortable on the cold metal floor on their holding cell. "When my father grew too old, he asked to merge with him so that his knowledge could still aid me. However, despite all my mystic training and power, Broly still caught me off guard," the Namekian remarked. "That's actually rather impressive," Frieza said, crossing his arms and leaning back against the wall. "But what exactly is a Namekian shaman?" he asked. Slack pursed his lips in thought. "Think on the warriors and the dragon clans you encountered. Before the great storm, there were several clans, and the shamans were among those clans. We were practitioners of the mystic arts, though we used out magic for combat and focused very little on the schools of healing and magic materialization that the dragon clan used," he explained. Words, you guys are boring the crap out of me here," Inian spat. Frieza looked up and stared at the holding cell directly across from the one he and Slack were sharing. It seemed the tall Scientist was sharing a cell with Polari and Ace, all 3 women wearing the same power-suppressing headbands. Then Frieza noticed something was a little off, one of their crew was missing. "Wait, where's?" He paused, seeing Polari frantically pushing her fingers to her lips, telling Frieza to shush. She leaned over and mouthed across the corridor, "Midjayo is in hiding." Frieza blinked in surprise and then a grin crossed his face. Once Frieza and Inian's defeat became apparent back on Essos and Paragus's army started advancing toward the Shatterstar, Polari and Ace made a hasty plan that could help Frieza escape. Polari handed Midjayo the shape-shifting mechanical bracelet he had formed from the metacooler fragments and then shoved him into the large ventilation shafts of the Shatterstar. She had begged and pleaded with the lich she had grown to care for so dearly over these past few months and then waited to meet the Saiyan head-on. They had surrendered without a fight, knowing that they'd surely die if they tried to fight and thus they were taken aboard as prisoners. Then Paragus ordered that the Shatterstar be taken aboard as he planned to use it for spare parts. Midjayo only caught a sneaky glimpse at Paragus's ship through one of his viewports and the craft was simply gargantuan in size, a giant white egg covered in glowing lights. The hangar of the egg-like ship was huge in its own right, filled with several attack balls and small shuttles. But no troopers for the time being, so Midjayo took his chance and snuck from the Shatterstar and headed to one ventilation shaft. With a thought, the nanomachine bracelet changed shape and turned into an automatic screwdriver, which opened up the vent grate. He quickly crawled inside the vent and closed it shut behind him. Then, even if he had no detectable Kai signature, he had to be careful to leave no traces of his presence. From what his video probes had shown him, Midjayo knew the one-eyed Saiyan had placed Kai-suppressing headbands on his captured allies, thus the idea to remedy the situation that came to Midjayo's mind was to create an EMP. Lucky for him, these ventilation tunnels had no shortage of parts and electronics to convert. He climbed and crawled as quiet as a church mouse, opening up wall panels to scavenge wires and metal pieces, which were promptly integrated by the metacooler fragments, working ever closer to creating a portable EMP device. However, as he crept through the tunnels, Mid-Gyo froze in his tracks once he looked through one grate, seeing Paragus and that mind-controlled monster of his, Broly. The young man seemed to constantly be in a trance, and it was hard to believe such a depressed, wretched-looking creature could cause such destruction. But that sheer power caused Mid-Gyo to freeze. He clamped his beak shut and kept his eyes tightly closed, terrified to make even a breath if that monster detected his presence. Frieza, I honestly can't believe it. Ironically, his genocide of the Saiyans was the only reason we both survived. Paragus remarked, smirking as he looked at various stellar maps in the room around him. Mid-Gyo, against his better judgment, hazarded a glance into the chamber and was quite surprised with the star map. This giant egg-like spaceship was traveling into a different galaxy, the south one to be specific, a rapid pace. If Frieza and the others could seize this ship, they'd reach Earth in under a day even if they started in the South Galaxy. I think I'll leave him alive just long enough to see me kill Prince Vegeta. Paragus sneered. Broly didn't actually seem to be listening, absent-mindedly staring off into space. He should see the start of the new universal order that will bring about my boy. Paragus added, placing a gloved hand on the lanky Saiyan who was his son. Now go rest in your room. I don't want you being caught off guard again. Paragus said before he left with a flourish of his white cape. Broly lingered for a moment, as if in thought, and then walked out to find his room. Mid-Gyo silent and unmoving for what felt like an eternity, before he finally breathed a sigh of relief and continued on his journey to create his portable EMP. So, how are we gonna beat that lanky fuck when we get out of here? Inyan asked, leaning against the back of her cell and rubbing the small bruise she got on her cheek from the battle against Broly. Simple, we transform. I wasn't even at full power when he blindsided me, defeating him while transformed should be a trivial matter. Frieza remarked, his long ivory tail coiling beneath him to form a sort of makeshift chair. If it's of any use, I know a way to further enhance your power. Of course I'd need to remove the headband and have access to my Kai if I were to do it. Slack remarked, earning the curiosity of both Inyan and Frieza. The shamans were one of the clans who could unlock a person's hidden potential to further augment their fighting power. While I currently can't tell the potential of either of you, I imagine the increase would be admirable. While Frieza pondered the power he could receive from Slack's technique, an elderly voice chimed in which caught Frieza's attention. You can't seriously be considering fighting that beast, can you? An aged short green creature with a flowing white beard asked. He reminded Frieza of those ghastly Cyberman creatures the Saiyans were so fond of using. He enslaved us, he showed power no living being should possess, fighting him is madness. The short creature said, before spotting something moving down the corridor and promptly shuffling off in the opposite direction. It was at that moment Paragus came into view, a smirk on his disfigured face. I have to admit, I'm shocked that a Saiyan of all people would spare my life. What exactly is the meaning of this? The Arcosian asked, now standing up fully. Because, hard as it may be to believe, the only reason I'm alive right now is because of your attack on planet Vegeta. Paragus replied, causing Frieza's eyes to widen. My son was born on the eve of planet Vegeta's destruction, born with a power level of 10,000. King Vegeta was fearful of Broly's power and too blind to see my son's potential. As a result, he ordered for me and Broly to be killed. Paragus smirked at Frieza, but thanks to your death ball striking planet Vegeta, the shock unlocked Broly's latent power, which led to him forming a protective barrier. For you see, my son Broly is the legendary Super Saiyan. At this, Frieza went stone stiff, petrified. He was the reason his most feared enemy existed. Frieza was growing rather sick or irony. Unfortunately for me though, Broly's power soon grew to the point where even I wasn't safe from his rage. Paragus added, gesturing to the scar of where one of his eyes had once been. So I commissioned the creation of the Kai-suppressing headband and the ring that would allow me to control and direct Broly with greater ease. Yours are of a similar design, but all I need from you is for you to live just long enough to see my revenge against Vegeta for what his father did to us. Paragus explained. The older Saiyan smirked and stretched, and then you'll die too. The one-eyed Saiyan said, walking off once more. Frieza as he was, shocked to the core. There was a long silence before Inyan spoke up. What a butthole. By the time Paragus' egg-shaped craft landed on the ruined planet which Paragus had designated New Vegeta, Mid-Gyo had scavenged enough parts for the metacooler fragments to design a portable EMP. He spent several minutes using his mind to arrange the wiring and circuits in such a way that it would go off as planned. In the time Mid-Gyo spent working on the EMP and crawling to the holding cells, Broly, Paragus and their Shamoyan slaves had left for Paragus's fortress. The remnants of Paragus foot soldiers had stayed aboard to keep Frieza and his crew in check. Oh, if only they knew. The lid moved quietly through the ventilation shafts and after a while navigating the labyrinthine structure of the egg ship until he finally reached the holding cells. He was in full view of Polari's cell, which she was sharing with Ace and Inyan, and the avian saw his lover's face light up at the sight of him. Not wanting to leave Polari in that cramped cell any longer than need be, Midgio triumphantly clicked the portable amp and let the electronics distorting wave fly out across the egg ship and surrounding landscape of New Vegeta. Haha, surprise suck as Midgio cried out, punching his arm up and promptly wincing once he realized he just punched the roof of the vent. The imprisoned warriors promptly tore their now defunct headbands off and blew open their cell doors. In the span of a few seconds, Inyan and Frieza both transformed and sent the remaining Parga soldiers fleeing in terror. Excellent work Midgio. Frieza said, prying the grate open with telekinesis so the Birdman could slide free of the metal tunnel. Polari gave a happy squeal and rushed over, embracing the lid tightly. I knew you could do it. Oh, you are just so awesome, she said, pecking his beak affectionately. Midgio gave a nervous laugh, his skin flushing from the embassade. It was nothing. He said, deciding not to divulge information on his terror at the sight of Broly and his fears of impending death. Frieza cast his gaze towards Slack then, who was removing his tunic, the top half of his black eye, and then the thick white gauntlets. Every piece he shed is the ground with a loud thud and left a deep dent in the metal floor. An Namekian wearing weighted clothing. Why does that seem so familiar? He murmured. Anyway, are you prepared to kill this Broly character? I doubt the Emp reached far enough to affect his own crown. Frieza mused. Slack scowled and looked up. I'm not so sure about that. As Paragus walked through the corridors of his fortress with Broly in tow, he gave a howl of pain as the controller in his gloved palm crackled with electricity and shorted out. What the? He hastily glanced to Broly and his remaining eye widened in horror. Broly took a confused blink as his daze wore off and he slowly looked around where what the? He gaze settled on Paragus. You, the legendary Saiyan snarled, tearing his headband off in one swift motion. He quickly powered up, his hair shining gold instead of blue and the force of his Kai knocking Paragus flat on his ass. He shot his father a hate-filled glance and spat. You're the one who kept me inside a prison of my own mind for all these years, made me your slave. No more, Dad. I'm calling the shots now, you filthy worm. As his anger built, his power did also, and soon he doubled over in pain as his muscles started to swell. No and no, this was what I was afraid of, Paragus murmured shakily, flying as fast as he could through the corridors of his castle, desperately trying to reach his shipper and attack ball. The earth quaked and rumbled, and then suddenly a giant green orb of Kai exploded out from the fortress, completely obliterating it. From the ashes a figure burst forth and crashed one monstrous knee onto Paragus' spine, completely shattering it and then reducing Paragus's torso to a pulpy mess once he applied a little more force. Frieza and the others had been drawn out to the landing ramp from all the commotion being caused, and all of them stared in awe at the impossibly muscular, wide-eyed appearance of Broly's legendary Super Saiyan form. Now then, Broly growled, standing up fully and staring at Frieza, Inyan and Slack. Which of you wishes to die next? Frieza, Inyan and Slack all glared at Broly, who was clenching his monstrous fists in anticipation for the incoming battle. Lord Frieza, no matter what, you have to keep this ship safe. Midgio murmured from behind. Frieza gave a mere nod in response. Ace, Polari, I want you two to go round up the slaves and get them aboard. We'll keep Broly busy. Frieza remarked. His blazing garnet eyes narrowed at the hulking Saiyan and he clenched both his fists together once his bone mask clamped over his features. You're the monster that's haunted every nightmare I've ever had since I was a boy. You're the beast who I once feared would topple my empire, the creature who killed my great-great-grandfather, reborn. As Ace and Polari dashed off to gather the Shamoyans, Frieza's crimson aura flickered to life. I am the one who has to defeat you now. I'll conquer my greatest fear once and for all, he snarled. He dashed forth and shot a rapid punch at Broly, which was hastily blocked with one massive arm, but Frieza was unwilling to let up and instead drove his heel into Broly's hip and forced him to stumble backwards in pain. Inyan flew forth like a golden bullet, her elbow driving into Broly's cheek and knocking him back a few meters. Those big freak muscles might make you strong, but I bet they make you slow as shit, Inyan mocked. She gave a loud yelp as she narrowly dodged one of Broly's large fists. Gah, he's fast too, the ebony Saiyaness remarked before Broly roared and backhanded her into the sky. Frieza and Slack both lunged forth, throwing skilled punches and kicks at the legendary Super Saiyan. He was grinning like a madman as he blocked most of the incoming strikes, and even those that broke his guard only left purple welts, which the Saiyan seemed to ignore. Entirely. With puny strength like that, you'll never beat me, Broly cackled, his fist smashing down like a jackhammer, causing Slack to crash through the stone bridge. Frieza threw another strong punch, which was quickly caught and held tight in Broly's massive hand. My weakling father said that I have you to thank for the power I now possess. Isn't that a laugh? But I think I'll show my thanks by killing you quicker than your pathetic friends, the giant spat. An orb of lime green Kai formed in Broly's other hand, which he promptly jammed against Frieza's chest. The orb sent the former tyrant flying skyward, and once the orb exploded, Frieza was sent soaring across the horizon. Inian dashed forth and fired a gold Kai beam at Broly, hitting him just above the abs. The towering abomination that called itself a Saiyan snarled and growled in pain and discomfort, but with a quick pump of his chest the beam dispersed, leaving a black scorch on Broly's torso. His pain-filled grimace turned to a grin, and Broly dashed forth, smashing Inian with a clothesline and knocking the Saiyanus across the horizon to the ruined, desolate city in the distance. They'd come back soon enough, so Broly decided to vent his destructive tendencies elsewhere. His wide eyes scanned about, setting on a crowd of slaves. The Shamoyans really had no time to be skeptical of the two Arcosian maidens who went to round them up, not with the super warriors causing the planet itself to tremble with their power. They were like the gods and demons of the Shamoyan folklore, the creatures whose wrath was so powerful that the stars themselves were mere after effects of their power. These monsters were all too real. "Come on, this way," Ace whispered frantically, leading a large crowd of the stumpy aliens from the mines they had been housed in toward the egg ship, which could easily house their numbers. "How do you think Frieza and the others are faring, Polari?" "Polari?" Ace repeated. She turned to see her oldest friend staring wide-eyed into the sky. Following her friend's gaze, Ace's eyes also widened once they saw a grinning cross-armed Broly glowering down at them. He landed a few feet away, his gold boots giving a menacing clank as they touched the earth. Ace visibly tensed, and the Shamoyans were all cowering in terror. "Polari, I want you to take those little guys and get them as far away as possible. I'll try and occupy him." What, Ace, why you seriously can't be telling me to just abandon you?" Polari murmured, shaking her head softly. "I won't leave you, this is just I never left you before and I won't start now," she exclaimed. "Polari," Ace murmured in disbelief, her eyes welling up slightly at her oldest friend. Broly's wide eyes cast over the trembling Shamoyans and a smirk crossed his manic face. "Oh look, the little slaves decided to be brave and flee," he growled mockingly. He turned his back on the group and stared to the night sky. "I noticed how you all like to look up at the sky at that silly planet of yours," he remarked. His voice now oozed venom and sarcasm. "You're probably dreaming that you could go back there someday." Suddenly a green Kai ball formed in his hand, "But it's just a dream," he yelled, spinning rapidly and flinging the Kai orb at the group. At the last moment it swung up, looking to head on a collision course for the Shamoyan homeworld. Until an orb of jade fire collided with the Kai ball mid-air, causing it to explode in the sky before it could get anywhere near the small planet. Broly gave an annoyed gurgle, and the crowd of Shamoyans breathed a collective sigh of relief as the attack was foiled. Glancing quickly to one side, the hulking Saiyan spotted Slack holding one outstretched arm. "Think again, monster. You robbed me of my home, but you won't take the home of anyone else," he spat, baring his fanged teeth. Inian landed beside Slack, a few scratches and scars on her exposed dark flesh, and some chunks missing from her armor. Following that, Frieza flew above the group, his aura ablaze with power. "Attack together," he ordered, dashing in and firing off a rapid storm of punches and kicks which Broly was weaving away from. Inian joined him in the assault and really helped push Broly onto the defensive, but they still weren't landing any clean hits on the manic bastard. It was at that moment that Slack managed to swoop around and strike Broly from behind. He raised one arm, wreathed in emerald fire, and chopping at Broly's ribs. The legendary Saiyan shrieked and howled in agony as his flesh was burned by the green blaze. Slack pulled his arm back and briefly smirked at the damage his caused, a blackened scar of molten, blistering flesh that still simmered from the latent heat of the shaman's mystic flames. You hurt me," Broly mumbled. Never had he been injured too heavily in combat, but in one swipe alone Namekian had shattered the legendary Super Saiyan's previous notions of invulnerability. "You slime," Broly snapped, grabbing one of Slack's arms in one hand and then swinging his free gargantuan fist at Slack's torso. The force of the punch tore his arm clean from its socket, sending sprays of purple blood across the gray ground beneath them. "Ah!" Slack howled, gripping his bleeding purple arm stump. "Why do people always tear off the goddamn arms?" Slack snarled, writhing in shock and pain. Broly leapt into the sky, his legs raised so he could stomp on the downed Namekian on impact, only for Frieza to swoop in at the last moment. One of his 4 ebony horns grazed the fresh blistered burn on Broly's ribs. The Saiyan howled in anger and agony as the black horns opened and deepened his gash further. While Broly was distracted by this new experience of pain, Frieza clamped both his hands together and smashed into the towering Saiyan's lower back with such force that he was sent hurtling into a plateau which shattered on impact. Without a moment's hesitation, Frieza formed a massive death ball, crackling with red and black lightning, in one hand and promptly flung it at Broly. The giant scrambled to his feet and caught the incoming sphere of Kai. Frieza was channeling a great deal of telekinetic force behind the death ball, which was gradually pushing Broly deeper into the planet's crust despite the Titan's impressive physical strength. It all came down to mental power versus physical power right now. Frieza gave a grunt of strain and whipped his head around the glare at Ace, and Polari, damn it, I told you to get the aliens to the ship, go now, he snapped. The two Arcosians hastily nodded and dashed off, the Shamoyans following quickly behind. Slack gave a grunt and a new arm burst forth from the crushed stump Broly had left behind. We'll hold him off and keep him away from you, don't worry. He called to the fleeing group. Green juices ran off his freshly regenerated arm, which he quickly flicked off before flying into the air to join Frieza and Inian. Frieza was unafraid right now, from the moment he saw that Broly could feel pain like anyone else. This beast bled, and if it bled Frieza could kill it. Be damned it, Frieza, you can't let that thing reach the core, it'll blow up the whole damn planet, Inian yelled, the struggle shaking the ground and kicking up a dust storm. By this stage, half the Kai orb was buried halfway into the earth and continuing to sink. I don't plan on blowing the planet up, the Arcosian lord grunted out through grit teeth, his voice echoing against his bone faceplate. His red eyes glanced toward the fleeing crowd, and he estimated they were far enough away at this stage. I plan on blowing him up, Frieza snarled. Inian, blast into the core of my death ball. Inian decided it would be best not to argue with Frieza right now. She shot her arm out, and a beam of blue light from her palm breached the outer shell of the death ball. There was a white hot flash from the ensuing explosion that blinded the three warriors, and new Vegeta quaked from the ungodly power being unleashed. Frieza just hoped it'd be enough to put Broly down. Ever since Raichi had retrieved Cooler and began molding him into a new creation he had dubbed Unit Alpha, he had sent probes to scour the galaxy and latch onto the Shatterstar. To Raichi's surprise, another two Saiyans had captured Frieza and his crew, and what shocked him even further was that the ship they used was fast enough to cross an intergalactic distance in no time flat. Potentially very useful if he could get his hands on the tech and analyze it properly. But for the time being, Raichi concerned himself with the destruction of the Saiyans, the prime directive the original had given him. Unit Alpha. He began, the mechanical facsimile of an Arcosian prince stood to attention, his red visor-shaped eye glowing viciously. I'm dispatching you to the South Galaxy to get energy from the warriors in Frieza's company and to kill his Saiyan accomplice if at all possible. He ordered. A nod was all Raichi received in response despite Unit Alpha's abilities to talk. The modified metacooler clanked off to a glowing white platform inside Raichi's fortress. A white orb of energy enveloped Unit Alpha, and like a comet, it launched him across the voice of space. While the orb propelled Alpha at massively FTL speeds, it would still take some time for him to reach the South Galaxy, unfortunately. On the plus side, by the time Alpha reached his destination, there would be a victorious Saiyan to slay and plenty of energy to draw out of that warrior. When the dust cleared, Frieza's scarlet eyes widened at the sight of Broly standing at the heart of an expansive crater. He was hardly unharmed, his flesh covered by bruises and burns, his trousers in tatters, and his gold bracelets cracked heavily from the battle. But he was very much alive and very angry looking. The legendary Super Saiyan's chest was heaving up and down from pain and fatigue, but he seemed to be gradually regaining his breath. To Frieza's shock and worry, the muscular mountain of a warrior's Kai seemed to be replenishing itself, but for whatever reason this only made Broly's pain and discomfort grow. My Kai is rising, it's overflowing, Broly grunted out. The green Kai bubble expanded around Broly's wounded body, and he shot skyward, rising even further than Frieza and his allies. What's he doing? Inian growled, her whole body tensing up for battle. The sky flashed different shades of green, and Broly's power started to fluctuate wildly, and then all of a sudden he started firing Kai balls in all directions. They struck the ruined city, they blew apart the expansive forests, they flew into the black skies above New Vegeta. Broly wasn't even aiming, it was as if he was just shooting wildly in an attempt to cause as much wanton destruction as possible. Frieza saw several stray Kai blasts heading toward the egg ship. With lightning-fast reflexes, Frieza raised one arm up and fired off a barrage of purple death beams, the thin beams quickly intercepting the green orbs and causing them to detonate before they could do any damage to Frieza's ticket off this disgusting ruined excuse for a planet. Finally, the bizarre, random bombardment came to an end, and Broly breathed a small sigh of relief. Whatever had been plaguing him was out of his system, it would seem. It was at that moment that a stark realization came to Frieza in relation to the bizarre genetic defect that was unique to Broly. His Kai seemed to constantly regenerate, but powerful as his body was, it could only hold so much. Those huge muscles were the result of his Kai surging and bulking his body up. He was like a balloon being constantly filled, if he let his energy build too high he'd burst. Or someone could pop him. Thinking quickly on his rapidly forming plan, Frieza sent a telepathic message to Slack and Inian, I need you two to hold Broly off. I have a plan, but I'll need a little time to make sure the attack has just enough Kai behind it. He instructed. His two allies made no indication that they'd actually heard the order, but then their auras flared up and the two rushed at the wounded Broly, giving roars for battle. While Slack and Inyon rained down punches and kicks which were all dodged or blocked by Broly, Frieza raised his middle and index finger up. Red and gold Kai started to build along his fingertips, rising up his hand to form the crackling energy sphere of a Nova Death Beam. With Broly's Kai regeneration, Frieza had to channel a great deal of energy into this to guarantee it would pierce his hide, and he needed him distracted enough so that he could land the attack cleanly. If Broly got wise to Frieza's plan, then it would all be for naught. He just had to hope Inyon and Slack could hold Broly off long enough for Frieza's plan to come to fruition. Inyon swooped down at Broly's injured form, her fist colliding with his brow and causing his head to arch back a few inches. The giant hardly cared, however. He gave a manic growl and slammed his monstrous fist into Inyon's abs, knocking all the wind out of the ebony Saiyaness and launching her across the gray skies of New Vegeta. The giant Saiyan weaved his body to avoid a flaming chop from Slack, fully aware that his emerald fires could easily harm his inhuman frame. Broly's fist slammed into Slack's lower back and sent him hurtling to the ruined city beneath him, forming a deep crater on impact with the shattered concrete. Not wasting a moment, Broly div-bombed towards Slack and the Namekian shaman narrowly dodged a punch from the giant's deformed fists. Slack pulled one arm back, black lightning surging on his fingers, and promptly smashed his palm into Broly's abs. A strange lightning burst from Slack's hands and coiled around the legendary Saiyan's large body, causing Broly to howl and roar in pain as the black energy constricted his body in a sort of straitjacket. But it lasted for a brief moment as Broly flexed his green aura outward with such force that it smashed Slack away through a crumbling old wall. Broly turned to see Inyon floating above him. "You're going down, broccoli," she spat, punching her open palm. Broly merely smirked and gestured for Inyon to come get him with a casual finger gesture. Polari scrambled through the seemingly endless stories of the egg ship that belonged to the late Paragus. It was huge, especially compared to the Shatterstar, and the Arcosian feared she'd never find the bridge. The constant explosions going on a short distance from the ship only served to fray her nerves and made navigation even more difficult. When she finally did find the bridge, she found Midgio scrambling about, checking every monitor and screen he could find. "Can you fly it?" the Arcosian girl asked, approaching the lit. Midgio gave a small nod. "Alone, a short distance. We'll need a bigger crew if we want to keep it though," he replied. "Listen to this though, I checked through some of Paragus's personal files and found that in a few months a massive comet would collide with New Vegeta. Paragus knew this full well, but still set up camp. I wonder why." "Does it matter?" Polari cut in, "Checking some of the bridge controls. We can check his stuff later, but now we need to be prepped to leave. I mean if Lord Frieza gets killed by that monster out there," she said, worry evident in her tone. Midgio held one of her hands and shushed her. "Easy, Frieza will pull through. No matter what, he always comes out on top in the end," he assured her. In truth though, this Broly creature was terribly strong. No, Midgio had to remain confident right now. For her. Broly's massive fist struck Inyon in the gut and sent her skidding several meters backward. She dug her heels into the earth and stopped her momentum, giving a low breath as he finally corrected herself. "Ngh, goddamn, that's really starting to hurt," she growled, gritting her teeth in pain. Broly gave a cackle and lunged forth, his massive hand gripping the top of Inyon's skull. The brute flew forth, grinding Inyon's skull into the concrete, splitting the earth beneath her. The ebony Saiyaness focused herself once more and raised both her hands up. Her hands glowed bright blue, and she fired a massive beam of Kai against Broly's stomach. The beam split against his flesh, Broly snarled in pain, and Finala dropped Inyon to the ground. The Super Saiyan stumbled back, examining the smoking scorches on his chest that Inyon had left behind, and gave a grunt. "Scum." He spat, kicking Inyon in the gut and knocking her across the ground. Inyon's hair lost its gold sheen and returned to its red shades, falling before her face. "Ngh, that's it, I can't fight anymore," she grumbled. Suddenly Broly pressed his gold boot to the back of Inyon's head and smashed her face into the hard ground with a small amount of force. "Tch, I had high hopes, you could have been pretty useful to me. Now you're just a waste of Saiyan blood who deserves to die." Broly spat. Suddenly a beam of yellow light shot out from the shadows, skinning Broly's shoulder and drawing some blood from him. Broly grit his teeth and looked around frantically. Okay, who had the balls to do that? His eyes settled on Slack, purple bruises and bloodstains marking his olive drab skin, a look of determination on his face. Broly gave an enraged roar and seemed to forget all about Inyon. He flew straight at Slack and threw a powerful fist. However, the second he touched Slack, the Namekian shaman burst into thick black smoke. "What the?" Before Broly could finish the sentence, a white boot struck him full force in the jaw and sent him hurtling through several crumbling buildings, which wound up collapsing atop Broly. Slack, the real one and not the illusion that Broly had struck, landed quietly and glared at the rising Saiyan. "Your rage has grown quite intense, Broly. It's clouding your senses if you couldn't see through a flimsy illusion like that," the Namekian remarked. He dashed at Broly and then suddenly weaved around him, trying to move Broly away from Minion's position and deeper into the ruined city. Broly took chase and very quickly caught up with Slack, wrapping his large hands around the Namekian's skull, intent on crushing the brain matter out of the pesky slug. All of a sudden though, Slack's arms stretched out like rubber, his palms digging into Broly's abdomen. Emerald fire burst from his palms, burning into the flesh of the legendary Super Saiyan, making Broly snarl and screech in agony, quickly launching Slack at the ground to stop the burning. Slack smashed into the earth and left a deep crater, and through fading consciousness, he watched Broly staring in shock at his sizzling, black and blistering abdomen. "Brah, I'll kill you all, I'll turn this whole stinking planet to dust," Broly roared, raising one arm up and forming a massive green Kai ball in one hand. Seemed his rage had grown so far that he'd willingly doom his own life to kill his foes. Slack gave a broken, tired laugh. "Your rage really is clouding your senses, you moron," he mocked. Broly raised a brow, not sure what the wounded Namekian meant by that remark, until he felt something pressing into the small of his back, something burning hot. "Surprise!" Frieza growled, before firing his fully charged Nova Death Beam through Broly's stomach, leaving a fist-sized hole through Broly's chest. Broly gave a primal scream that seemed to stretch on for infinity. His whole body glowed with Kai, light radiating from high solid wide eyes, and some unseen force seemed to lift Broly into the sky. With a powerful, ear-splitting shriek, Broly was enveloped by a potent explosion. Frieza breathed a low sigh of relief as fatigue started to wash over his body. For a moment he thought Broly had been completely blown apart until he saw a withered body fall from the smoke and crash into a grey mesa. Wordlessly, the Arcosian landed beside Broly and glared at him. He was in his base form now, a gaping wound in his torso miraculously though he lived. As withered as a skeleton, covered in vile burns and bruises and almost entirely devoid of energy, but alive. He gave an angered, weak growl and glared up at Frieza. He tried to say something, but no words would form. "You're strong, extremely so. Leaving you alive makes you too much of a threat, however. You've already survived against seemingly impossible odds, and there's still a slim chance you could live through this. I can't risk that," Frieza said, extending one arm out. The wide beam of violet Kai shot from his palm, enveloping the half-dead Broly and rendering him fully dead, leaving naught but a scorch where the legendary Super Saiyan had once been. The Super Arcosian stood in silence for a few moments, letting the wind of new Vegeta blow in his ears. His body gradually shrunk in size, and his spikes faded back into the slender frame of his fourth form. "I wonder is Goku as strong as you right now?" Frieza mumbled to himself. Growing tired of these surroundings, he gathered Inyon and Slack up with his telekinesis, carrying them back to the egg ship, finding the medbay quickly enough and setting them in two large medicine machines. His own injuries could wait to be tended, for now Frieza focused on finding Mid-Gyo, and quickly enough he reached the bridge of the ship. "Can you fly it?" he asked. Mid-Gyo gave a nod in response to the Shamoyan homeworld, "but we'll need a large crew to man everything else. I'll also need time to unlock all of Paragus's systems," he explained. "Have you named the ship by any chance?" Frieza hummed in thought and rubbed his chin. "I suppose the Snow King makes for a good name, wouldn't you agree? In honor of my ancestor Fayu, the first Super Arcosian." Polari gave a grin and a nod. "Wonderful choice, my lord." Mid-Gyo also gave a nod. "The Snow King it is. Prepare for our first flight," Mid-Gyo said, scoring the control panel. He pressed a few switches and suddenly the Snow King rumbled and rose before rapidly blasting off into space, rapidly flying to the Shamoyan homeworld. Frieza and his crew had spent a few months on the Shamoyan planet, time spent with Mid-Gyo trying to access all the systems on the Snow King with the aid of Ace and Polari. With nothing much else to do, Frieza, Inyon and Slack had spent the majority of their time either training or aiding the Stumpy natives in the restoration of their homes. It actually felt nice to receive their gratitude. Frieza and Inyon had also, of course, had their potential unlocked by Slack, and the boost had been hefty indeed. Frieza felt he could have handily beaten Broly alone with his new power. It also had a neat little side effect in that Frieza could now draw upon all the power of his fourth form without having to bulk his muscles up. Inyon had also worked on pushing the limits of her Super Saiyan form, seeing how heavily she relied on it now. In the few months after Broly's defeat, the Saiyaness had found a way to utilize the form without the usual physical strain, and now even walked around as a Super Saiyan without showing a hint of the anger or grim determination normally associated with the form. Slack's training had been different. Rather than try draw out physical power, he seemed to always meditate to draw out some sort of mental and spiritual strength. He sparred with his comrades, of course, and he had grown a bit stronger than before. Today, however, Frieza was simply relaxing beneath the shade of a mushroom-shaped tree. The natural beauty of this planet was quite admirable, and with the ecosystem returning to its former glory with each passing day, it would soon become a paradise to any individual with a love for nature in their heart. Frieza lazily popped one eye open once he heard the sound of grass crunching underfoot and found a small group of Shamoyans approach him. "Ah, Mr. Frieza, sir, my people just wanted to thank you for all that you've done for us," one female said. "Think nothing of it," Frieza replied, sitting up fully. The female coughed into her fist. "Well, it's just that my people wanted to find some way to reward you. We don't have much, but several of us offered to work on your ship. When we were slaves we were taught how to use all the machinery on it, so we'd be a real big help if you let us join," she said, giving a smile. Frieza scratched his chin at the offer. Well, Midjaya was always whining about needing a crew for a ship as big as the Snow King. "Very well," Frieza replied, standing up full. "I accept your offer," he added, shaking the small Shamoyan girl's hand. Frieza gave a small smile and walked off, hearing their small cheers as he moved into the small town he had helped rebuild. The Arcosian soon stumbled upon Slack and the Shamoyan elder, the one with the flowing white beard from before, deep in conversation. Slack looked up. "Ah. Hello, Frieza," the Namekian shaman remarked, smiling warmly at him. "Hey. What are you two speaking about?" Frieza asked, taking a seat on a small wall by the two. "Besic and I were just talking about the planet's future protection. I have offered to serve as their planet's guardian after I have seen your own journey to its completion," Slack explained, gesturing at the elderly Shamoyan. Besic gave a nod. "It's a major threat we face. We are not warriors as you can plainly see, and who's to say another beast like Broly won't come to our home again?" The elder asked. "We need some sort of powerful outsider with a kind heart who would willingly protect our planet and people," he explained, giving a low weary sigh. "I see." Frieza murmured. "Very well, Slack, if that is your wish, then I will have the Snow King drop you back here once I handle my affairs on Earth. Soon enough, I promise," he said. Slack gave a nod and smiled warmly at Frieza before turning his gaze to the cloudy sky above. For the time being it all seemed so tranquil, such a beautiful world that had been ravaged by horrors such a short time ago. The Namekian tensed suddenly, causing Frieza to raise a brow up. Curiosity overtaking him, Frieza also glanced to the sky and also noted something odd. The sky was darkening, for some reason. Inyan approached from around the corner then, her hair spiked and golden, and a grin on her face. "Up, nerds?" she asked, hands resting on her hips. Seeing their expressions, Inyan also glanced to the sky and noted something odd. "Hey, is it getting dark? Is it nighttime already?" the ebony Scioness asked, glancing back at her allies. Suddenly the sky went from black to a bright orange shade, a meteor of some sort bursting through the clouds and swooping over the small Shamoyan village. The villagers shrieked and ran for cover inside their small huts, while Frieza exchanged worried glances with his two allies. "Never a dull moment," Inyan said giddily, dashing off to the small forest which bordered on the Shamoyan town. Frieza gave Slack a deadpan glance and then flew off side by side with the Namekian shaman, heading to the smoldering crater that had formed within the forest. The trio descended and landed on the sloped earth that the comet's impact had created, and their gazes became transfixed on the smoke flowing from the massive dent in the planet's crust. Gradually, however, the smoke began to clear and a figure slowly came into focus. Frieza's eyes widened in shock and he took a slow step back. "That thing in there, that was a metacooler, all right. A heavily modified version, but the former tyrant easily recognized the features such as the shiny armor and the physical build similar to that of his late sibling. But there were the obvious differences. The cyclopic glaring red eye, those strange grafts on his forearms that looked akin to blasters, those green gems studded on its body, and the strange patterns engraved on its purple shell. Unit Alpha didn't even seem to notice Frieza, however. Its gaze settled on Inyan, and it quickly entered into a fighting stance. "Attention Saiyans, come. Die." There was a tense moment of silence as Unit Alpha entered its fighting stance, staring down Inyan and Inyan alone. He dashed forth and buried his fist into the Scioness's gut, the force causing her eyes to bulge from her skull and a strangled gasp of agony escaping her lips. Alpha's knee shot up into Inyan's chin then, sending her soaring into the sky. Frieza quickly shot a hand forth and struck Alpha with a telekinetic blast which carved a deep trench in the forest and uprooted the trees. Unit Alpha tumbled a few times from the strike, but very quickly righted himself and fired a searing hot beam from his singular eye, which was only narrowly avoided by the former tyrant. "Brother, speak to me," Frieza roared, outraged and confused by Cooler's return. He received no answer. Suddenly a beam of golden light shot down from the heavens, the explosion consuming Alpha quickly enough and forming a deeper crater in the earth. Inyan slowly descended, smoke billowing off her hands. "I hate machines. No energy to detect," she mumbled. The smoke began to clear and Alpha casually walked from the battle-damaged crater. He had only a few black scorches on his chest from the blast, and for whatever reason the lime green gems on his body were glowing slightly. "HRM. Did anyone else sense that?" Slack asked, tossing his weighted gear behind him. The others entered their fighting stances, but their silence was all the answer that the shaman needed. There was a small flicker of Kai from those gems. Gone as quick as it came though. Inian tense, then suddenly she swerved to avoid a purple death beam fired by the mechanical menace, and she promptly struck back with golden hand blast. Alpha raised one arm up, and the Kai bolt seemed to just get sucked into the gem, the force of the attack only leaving some small burns on Alpha's ornate metal skin. He dashed straight at Inian, and their fists struck each other, shaking the earth and reducing the surrounding trees to splinters with the inhuman power of their attacks. Frieza quickly transformed and hammered his fist into Alpha's gut, sending him skidding backward, then Slack swooped in and struck Alpha with a mighty uppercut, creating a small sonic boom and sending Alpha high into the air. Did anyone else feel a little bit weaker after punching him? Frieza asked, watching Alpha correcting himself from his mid-air tumbling. He's absorbing our Kai. From our energy blasts and from our auras when we physically strike him. Slack explained, a small I'm tint glowing from his pupils, focusing his Kai sensing abilities. We have to put him down quickly or he may well suck us dry. Something's not right though. Frieza murmured, he's too silent to be cooler, someone's done something to him, I don't know what though. We need to try and cripple this shell so he can't harm us, then we figure out what's up with his mind. Frieza explained. His eyes widened as he saw Alpha raise a finger up, forming a supernova in the sky above which darkened the sky. We better do it fucking quickly, then Inian yelled, raising both her toned ebony arms high above her head and forming a white and blue Kai orb between her hands. Cooler's eyes opened slowly, and he found his fingers digging into a white column that seemed to stretch so high skyward that he couldn't even see the end of it. All that remained above him was a glowing golden portal, fluffy heavenly clouds swirling lazily around the strange circular portal. Cooler murmured. He tightened his grips in the column and looked beneath him, seeing an eternal void as black as night, which looked as if it were swallowing the column below him. The voice from nowhere, whether it was familiar or not Cooler could not tell, echoed in his mind, climb or die. As soft as a whisper. Cooler weighed the offer for a few moments, then started climbing, gradually scaling the white pillar. For whatever reason, he couldn't tap into his Kai. He couldn't fly. He couldn't move with any superhuman degree of speed. He couldn't even throw himself up with superhuman strength. Right now he couldn't recall why he was here, but he knew someone had put him here. Their motives were blurred to him, but Cooler supposed those things did not matter in this particular moment in time. Someone had sunk him in this strange pit, and it was only here and now that he found the willpower to regain some degree of his consciousness. He had his choices, climb or die, and right now those were the only things that mattered to the former ruler. Climb or die. Climb. Or die. He kept moving, hand over hand, yet his destination seemed to get no closer. His fingers began to bleed, his knuckles started to grow a darker shade from the strain. But the firstborn son of King Cold was no quitter. His whole life was a strain, but he never gave in then. Death would not claim him, he had decided that much, he would be free. Climb or die. Uahaha, this is glorious, the Raichi AI yelled, his mismatched eyes scanning from his video monitor, which displayed the brawl between Unit Alpha and Frieza's crew, and then switching back to his various instruments. Hachiuk's power is already at 89%, and growing at this rate those fools will discharge enough Kai to power up all of the Dark Planet's reserve generators. He remarked, stroking his spectral mustache. He turned his mismatched eyes back to watch the explosive beam struggle between Unit Alpha and Frieza's crew. Frieza gave a snarl as his red Kai beam seemed to merge with Slack's gold one and Inian's blue and white blast. The trio of Kai beams locked in a deadlocked struggle against Unit Alpha's golden supernova. All we're doing is providing him more Kai to absorb, Frieza snarled, the earth shaking from the clash of their energy beams. Even now he could see stray wisps of Kai being sucked away from the trio of energy beams, and he could also feel portions of his aura being sucked into those blasted lime green gems on Alpha's metal shell. We need to give it everything, burst through the supernova, while we still have the Kai to do it, Inian grunted. The earth shook beneath them as the supernova pushed forth a few inches, and the heat radiating off it caused the skins of the three allies to sizzle slightly, burns beginning to form on their bodies. Ah shit, Inian said, grunting and wincing as her dark skin was slowly cooked by the blazing ball of energy. Everyone, attack together, give it everything, Slack roared. The trio yelled in unison as massive surges ran up each of their Kai beams. The trio merged into one rainbow-colored typhoon of power. In one mighty burst, the blast cleaved through the supernova. It struck Unit Alpha, and there was a loud mechanical shriek as the mechanical monster was carried across the skyline by the blast. The beam struck a distant mountain which exploded in an instant, vaporizing half of it from the awe-inspiring combined power of the Trinity's attack. Smoke rose into the sky, which was slowly returning to its normal hue, and for a moment the shattered mountain looked almost like an ancient volcano. The trio breathed a collective sigh of relief, taking a moment to catch their breath, despite the brevity of all that. I feel drained. Slack grunted, the burns on his olive drab skin slowly healing. Frieza tensed and looked to the mountain. Come on. We need to retrieve my brother. Stubborn bastard wouldn't even die from that. Raichi gave a low sigh as he scanned the damage reports on Unit Alpha's body. Arms shattered, one leg completely vaporized, tail torn in half. He muttered, giving small tuts and tsks as he read through all the damage that had been registered. But perhaps worst of all, he's lost his power-absorbing gems. He's of no use now, I suppose. Raichi said, glancing over to Hachiyuki. Still, he served his purpose. You're now at 100% my boy, and Unit Alpha sucked up just enough energy to provide power to 2 of my reserve generators. Hachiyuki gave a smirk and a happy snarl, punching his open palm. Raichi chuckled before turning to his control panel. Well, may as well shut him down. Raichi mused, pressing a small blue button on the dark computer bank. Cooler didn't know how long he'd been climbing for. His time sense seems to constantly be accelerating or retarding. He felt as it moving from one handhold to another took 5 months at times, and other times it seemed as if he could cross 24 miles in the span of 5 seconds. Sometimes that golden circle in the sky looked so close that he could just about reach out and touch it, sometimes it felt as if it was at the other end of the universe. It seemed he'd never reach his goal and get his freedom. He hated this, hated it beyond words and beyond description. He vowed he'd change his ways if he'd just be let free from this hell. He'd never live the life of a tyrant and enslave others again, not after he was rendered the slave of a machine. He just wanted to be out of here, he wanted to see a familiar face again. Please. After what felt like a solid decade of climbing, there was a rumbling that ran up the length of the pillar. He looked down swiftly at the black void that was always at the bottom of the pillar, and Cooler's eyes quickly widened when he saw the darkness growing higher and higher, swallowing the column into its inky blackness, and growing ever closer. The threat to Cooler's soul was very real now, and it seemed to snap his time sense back to reality. He could only focus on one thing now, the one thing that had existed in his mind through the solid eternity of climbing. Climb or die. He ascended and ascended, scaling the column and drawing ever closer to the golden portal. It seemed to stop moving now, it would so close he just had to keep outrunning the darkness. The 3 digits of each of his feet dug into the footholds beneath him, and he quickly pushed himself up with as much force as he could muster. He shot one arm up, reaching out to the golden light. Unit Alpha no, Cooler, sat up abruptly with a sharp gasp. Frieza and his allies jumped back in shock, all 3 entering fighting stances out of worry. Where he grunted. Suddenly he winced in pain, feeling completely crippled. Because he was, of course. Shattered arms and missing a whole leg. Luckily he was an Arcosian. Brother? Is that really you? Frieza asked, crouching beside his sibling and gazing into that red cyclopic eye that had been forced into his skull by Raichi. Frieza Cooler asked, wincing as electricity arsed from the cracks in his metal shell. Where are we? The last I recall I something about the big Jeet star. He murmured. I feel like I've been stuck in a mechanical straitjacket this past year, my mind being dictated by computers. I can see everything so clearly now, though I realize exactly how much I've wasted my time as an organic being, a life of cruelty. Frieza crouched and placed a hand on one of Cooler's scorched shoulders. Brother, he said softly, recalling his own spiritual journey, you're safe now, with me. Come, I'll take you to the Fire and we'll get you patched up. Frieza replied. He, obviously, couldn't read any sort of facial expression off his elder sibling's face. If he could, he'd see how crestfallen Cooler was to realize he was still in a mechanical shell. He hoisted the shattered shell of his brother into a telekinetic bubble and flew back to the Snow King with him. Slack flew by their side, and Inyon reluctantly followed after. A few days passed in which Cooler's body was repaired. In that span, the 2 brothers exchanged their stories and gradually rekindled their brotherly relationship. With no empire and no father to fuel them, they had no rivalry anymore. Nothing to compete over. Frieza had told his older sibling of his plan to use the Namekian Dragon Ball's 3 wishes, but stated he only had ideas for 2 wishes. He went on then to speak of his plans to head to Earth. Cooler, for his part, had decided to teach Frieza the instant transmission technique and his natural Kai, sensing as best he could. They were things the big Jeet star had implanted in his head and he hadn't been mentored properly. Still, Frieza had a thin grasp on the technique, it'd do well enough for now. When the Snow King reached New Namek, they found the Namekians had been kind enough to gather all the spheres in preparation for Frieza's arrival. Well, Murray had been kind enough, many other Namekians would rather not bother with helping Frieza at all. Murray spoke in incomprehensible Namekian, and the Dragon Balls began to glow. A column of light burst forth, and Frieza's allies, except for Slack, were stunned speechless at the muscular form of Purunga looming over them. So that is the Dragon of Dreams. Mighty Purunga, who bestowed his strength in the most ancient of Namekian. Slack mumbled to himself. Frieza, what is your first wish? The elder called back. Frieza had told his brother that the wishes had to be made in Namekian, so asking for things like immortality were off the table. Frieza placed his hands on his hips and calmly asked Porunga to bring back the planet Arcos, with all its cities and services as they were before the destruction of the planet. Frieza said. Murray translated Frieza's request, and there was a moment of silence. Porunga moved his hands and made an okay gesture, his eyes flashing as he fulfilled the wish. Excellent, Frieza said excitedly, clenching both his fists in excitement. Now, ask Porunga if he can restore the Arcosian population and Arcosian military who were killed in Kanchip's coup. He asked. Another long silence before Porunga made the same gesture and his eyes glowed. I can sense them all, Cooler exclaimed, his singular red eye scanning the heavens. There might be a few out in space, but they could survive there more than long enough to receive pickup. Alright, for your final wish? Murray asked, looking toward Frieza. The former Arcosian tyrant stroked his chin deep in thought. He'd put in a little thought but he only really had one idea. He glanced to Cooler, his mechanical shell glinting in the energy discharge. Frieza glanced back to Murray and asked, can Porunga convert my brother's body into an organic one, similar to the one he had before heading to Earth? He asked. His brother looked over in what Frieza assumed to be complete and utter shock. There was a moment of silence before Murray glanced back toward Frieza. This wish is particularly taxing, especially after the last two. Porunga can't make this organic body as powerful as his mechanical one, as a result. Cooler simply gave a nod in response. He didn't care about power, he just wanted to be able to feel. Porunga raised his massive scully hand and made the same gesture again. A glow enveloped the metal shell Cooler had been lodged into, and in a flash he was returned to his fourth form, the purple flesh with ivory armored parts. Cooler was stronger than he had been in his original organic body, perhaps a little weaker than Broly had been in his legendary Super Saiyan form by Frieza's estimation. He clenched his fist slowly, a look of awe on his face. He turned to his brother and pulled him in, hugging him as his thanks. Frieza couldn't even recall the last time his brother hugged him. What will you do now, brother? Frieza asked. Accompany me to Earth? He asked, looking up at his taller sibling when he stepped back. Cooler gave a low sigh and shook his head. Sorry. Not just yet, little brother, one of us has to go to Arcos and try to restore a degree of order. I will join you on Earth soon enough. He explained. Frieza gave a nod in response. Porunga vanished back into the Dragon Balls, which spun high into the air and shot across the surface of New Namek. Gradually, the sky regained its green shade. You're the rightful heir, so it should be you. Just recall everything that led to our planet's destruction in the first place. We cannot rule that way ever again. Frieza warned, earning another nod from Cooler. He pressed his index and middle finger to his brow, scanned the heavens, and in a flash the lanky Arcosian vanished into thin air. Frieza turned to Murray. Thank you for all of this. He said curtly, maybe we will never be friends, but I hope we are no longer enemies. Frieza said. Murray grinned slightly. Think nothing of it. It is odd for me to be helping you after the past, but you have made up for your crimes against the Namekian people. The elder remarked. Now go, be at peace. An interesting notion, but not one Frieza could follow right now. Slack glanced to his ally, his green arms folded over his chest. Heading to Earth now? He asked. In truth, the shaman knew full well what Frieza had planned, and he knew full well that in the end, Frieza's growth and maturity as a person would lead to a fine resolution. Frieza clenched his fists. Yes. It's time we head to Earth. I will have my revenge on Son Goku. The Earth was an oddly beautiful planet, Frieza thought to himself, staring down at the blue and green planet while standing on the tip of the Snow King, which was flying ever closer to its target. He wondered if Goku was still alive down there or if someone had managed to do him in. That weakling Vegeta would most likely try as much. Frieza doubted that he'd ever succeed there. The small Arcosian shut his eyes softly, the silence of the spatial void surrounding him sinking in fully. It would allow him to detect energy with much greater focus, no noises to distract him. He'd been practicing this whole energy sensing thing for the past while, but, of course, he was still far from good at it. Still, by this point he was able to detect the difference in Saiyan Kai against that of other species like Arcosians and Namekians. Scanning over the Earth with his mind, he detected two Saiyan Kai signatures. One was stronger than the other, so Frieza assumed it was Goku and that half-breed mongrel son of his. Well, he'd handle him if he tried to interfere in the battle, that Inyan would. She was itching for a proper fight ever since battling Alpha. He sent a quick telepathic message to Midgio, which the Lit would in turn pass to the Shamoyan crew aboard the Snow King. Set us in for a landing by those large Kai signatures in the mountains. Frieza explained, trying to send Midgio coordinates which he could pinpoint with the ships and built scouters. The lush green fields around Goku's Mount Paozu home were so lovely to see. While Krillin preferred the conveniences of city life, he could still lay back in the green grass with Goku and Gohan to watch the puffy white clouds drift overhead. The bald monk had changed into a navy t-shirt and cream shorts, seeing no point in his usual orange guy if he was spending his day off from training and trying to master that new Kaioken Tien was creating. Krillin glanced toward Goku and Gohan, both in their full-powered Super Saiyan form, lazing about so freely. I suppose Goku hasn't changed that much on the inside at least. Krillin thought to himself. Goku, currently dressed in an orange football jacket and tan slacks, claimed Cell was strong enough to beat him in the ground, but he was just so aloof about it and had done very little training in the 10-day wait for the Cell games. What was his trump card? He watched as a butterfly fluttered in and landed on the tip of the sleeping Saiyan's nose, batting its wings slightly once it settled. Look at them, Super Saiyan even when they sleep. This must be part of Goku's secret training, Krillin thought to himself. The butterfly quietly fluttered back into the forest. He spied a rock beside him and gave a small snicker, lifting it up and testing its weight. I bet he can sense what's going on for miles, which means if I chuck this rock at him, he'll blast it to bits without even opening his eyes. He gave another snicker and thought on how cool it'd be, and then he tossed it at Goku's forehead. The result was far from spectacular. It clunked Goku in the forehead, making the Saiyan yowl in pain and spring into a sitting position. Ah, what did you do that for? He yelled, rubbing his brow in annoyance. Darn it, if that's your idea of a joke, you've lost your mind, Goku yelled. Before Krillin could stammer out an explanation, all three suddenly tensed. Do you guys, oh please tell me you guys don't sense that too? Krillin pleaded, looking to the large black shape slowly descending from the heavens. Frieza. Goku said solemnly, his face growing stern. He was stronger now, to be sure, but by just how much, Goku couldn't say. The hulking egg ship lazily drifted across the lake. Goku and the others had settled down on the banks of and then landed across the lake. That was when Goku saw his old foe standing atop the ship. Not smirking like normal, right now he wore a face of grim determination. Wordlessly, Frieza floated off the cone of the egg ship and touched the lake, making the tiniest of ripples as he casually walked across the surface of the water. He could see Gohan and Krillin entering into fighting stances, but Frieza never broke eye contact with Goku. There was a flash and Frieza's aura flashed red. His whole body glowed white and he morphed into his fifth form, much to the shock of the trio. In a flash, Frieza had crossed the distance and smashed Goku in the cheek, launching him over a dozen meters away before Goku corrected himself. Frieza clashed with him, rending the earth from the combined force of their collision, both of them struggling against each other. Now that Goku had his wits about him, he seemed equal to the Arcosian in his super form. He glanced to his son and best friend who were about to jump into action, and Goku loudly yelled out, "Keep back, this is a fight I have to handle," stopping the two. He headbutted Frieza and sent him skidding, the once green grass being mulched by his feet. "Why are you back here?" Goku asked, rubbing his cheek slowly from the pain. "To prove my strength." Frieza replied, crossing his muscular arms over his chest, "I have come a long way to prove my superiority to you once and for all." "Surely you saw this coming?" he asked. "After all, you're the one who ensured my survival." Goku gave a snarl and lunged straight at Frieza, both of their elbows colliding and creating a powerful shockwave, which left a deep dent in the ground beneath them. Goku ducked under one punch and delivered several rapid palm strikes to Frieza's chest, marking him with small purple welts. Frieza gave a snarl and smashed his knuckles against Goku's nose, sending the normally kind-hearted Saiyan soaring across the landscape, crashing through two large boulders which shattered into nothing on impact. Finally, Goku skidded to a halt, briefly checking the tears in his baseball jacket. "Aw man, Kai's gonna kill me over this, it's the fourth jacket I've torn up this month." Inyan and Slack had stepped off the boarding ramp of the Snow King, acting as guards for Mid-Gyo and the two Arcosian women as they moved across the lake to get a better view of the action. "Phew, Lord Frieza's really not pulling his punches." "Sup shorties?" Inyan asked, landing behind the two. Krillin and Gohan stared at this ebony-skinned Super Saiyan in shock, surprised to see a female Saiyan and to see one in the service of Frieza. "You are aware that Frieza is the one who nearly wiped out your race, right?" Gohan asked. Inyan shrugged. "Yeah sure, dude, I still hate King Vegeta more since he's the d-bag who left me stuck on a hellish planet for over 20 years. Plus he's not so bad, he's been saving lots of people across the galaxy." Inyan remarked, giving a toothy grin as she watched the clash escalating in speed and ferocity, massive shockwaves in the distance sending tremors under Inyan's feet. "Indeed, Frieza has atoned for many crimes. Worry not, I have seen the depths of his soul and know full well how this battle will end," Slack said, watching as the distant impact shattered a hail to dust which was scattered to the wind. "The Namekian is working with Frieza too?" Krillin asked, visibly dumbstruck. A strong elbow to the face broke Frieza's bone mass clean in half and sent him soaring into the rocky ground. The former tyrant corrected himself and flipped backward a few times before skidding to a halt and glaring up at Goku. "HMPH, fair to say you've improved a fair bit too," he remarked, spitting on the dirt. As their battle grew more and more ferocious, it pushed them away from the lush forests and deeper into a grey rocky land, devoid of any life aside from the odd bit of fungi. Goku gave a huff of breath and flung the torn-up remnants of his baseball jacket behind him, the strong wind sending it sailing away. His white t-shirt had its share of rips and burns, but it could stay for now. "You've picked a bad time to come to Earth," Goku said sternly. "We have bigger threats to deal with, a monster more powerful than both of us combined." Frieza gave an irritated scoff. "Trying to distract me with flights of fancy won't help you," he replied. In truth though, he had detected one strange Kai signature when they were approaching Earth. He had tuned it out mostly, but whatever it was, it had bits of Saiyan, Arcosian and Namekian inside it. Frieza shot one arm forth and blasted a potent beam of Kai at Goku, which he quickly backhanded away and winced once he felt a burn from the blast on his hand. Frieza flung himself at his foe, wanting to smash Goku in the gut with his shoulder. But the loopy Saiyan adjusted himself in the air and swung a kick at Frieza's temple. The blow hit and dazed Frieza, the sheer strength behind the blow, shattering one of his fifth form's ebony horns and leaving it to tumble down to the rocky ground. Frieza was knocked back several inches, but managed to halt himself and blocked another kick from Goku. He lunged and swung his alien foot up, smashing the Super Saiyan in the ribs with his heel. Goku gave a grunt but managed to catch Frieza's foot and held it firmly in place despite the Arcosian struggling. He swung Frieza by the foot and then released him, sending him crashing into a jutting outcrop which collapsed atop him. Frieza burst up from the rock pile, only to be sent staggering back by several rapid punches to the torso and was promptly kicked up into the air by one of Goku's powerful feet. Frieza ducked under an incoming punch from Goku and then smashed his ivory fist straight into the Super Saiyan's diaphragm. Goku coughed and gagged and retched from the pain, while Frieza took advantage of his foe's stunning and lashed his tail out like a whip, letting it coil around Goku's exposed neck to hold him in place. "There was something rather humiliating you did to me on Namek, but I can't quite recall," Frieza remarked calmly, while Goku was struggling for breath. "Oh. Now I remember," he added, pulling one arm back. "You slapped some sense into me, right?" he yelled, smashing Goku across the face with the back of his hand. His hand moved like a blur, smashing Goku in the face with the palm and back of his hand repeatedly, sending sprays of spittle and blood into the air. Goku was seeing stars, getting dizzy from both the strikes to the face and his gradually decreasing air supply. He had to act quickly or he was done for. Goku pushed one hand forth and formed a ball of white Kai in his palm before launching the strong Kai beam against Frieza's stomach, and the tyrant howled from the pain which forced him to release Goku from the grip of his tail. The Super Saiyan shot out like a rocket and buried his heel into Frieza's face, shattering the other half of Frieza's bone mask and sending him soaring over a dozen meters away. He corrected himself quickly and whipped the incoming Goku in the ribs with his tail, smashing Goku down into the earth. The Arcosian lowered Divabum downward and buried both fists into his chest. He flew down, tunneling into the ground and brawling with Goku all the way down. The force of their unseen blows caused large chunks of rock to fly upward, and the tremors of their might shattered the grey rocky ground above them. Finally there was a golden flash visible through the cracks, followed by a mighty explosion which sent Frieza tumbling upward several dozen meters before he corrected himself. "GHKT lucky blast," he spat. The darkness of the crater Goku was still in was glowing a pale blue hue, and he could see the outline of Goku being illuminated by a Kamehameha wave. This technique alright, let's see how strong you really are now," Frieza yelled, raising both hands above his head and forming the crackling purple orb of his Cataclysm strike. Smaller in size, but more concentrated than the massive version he used during Arco's destruction. When Gohan, Krillin and Frieza's new allies moved closer to get a better view of the fighting, they had been joined by Piccolo, Yamcha and Tien, who had sensed the output of power from miles away. Because of the vast nature of their power, Tien forbade Chiaotzu from following him out here. "I knew he shouldn't have left Frieza alive, now he's stronger than ever," Piccolo grunted out, surveying the two Kai blasts being prepared by the two warriors. He was curious about the Saiyan and the Namekian who had sided with Frieza, but those were questions for later. Still, the way that Namekian looked at him, it felt as if he was looking through Piccolo, staring into his soul and into his mind, like a probing needle. "You faced Goku before and he gave you mercy, Demon King. As he did against this figure you all know as Vegeta. I do not see why you would think Goku would not show Frieza mercy," Slack remarked. Piccolo stepped back in complete and utter shock. How did you know about my past?" Piccolo asked, clenching his fists. "You and your friends shared a mutual shock at the sight of Frieza, lowering your mental defenses. Thus I read your mind and your memories," Slack remarked. "Perhaps a violation of privacy, but I needed to be sure you were all of heroic nature." Yamcha seemed to ignore the exchange, dumbstruck by the sheer onslaught of power from Goku and Frieza, which shook the rocky earth even from this distance. The Kai blast struck and seemed deadlocked, and the flashes of light forced Yamcha to cover his eyes for a brief moments. "This fight is pretty kick-ass, eh Scars?" Inyan asked, lazily floating behind Yamcha and placing her hands on his shoulders. Yamcha tensed and looked up at the frightening, yet beautiful dark-skinned Scientist. "What's your name?" Inyan asked, grinning. "Why Yamcha," he replied, blinking up at her. "DSH. Well, that's a dumb name," Inyan said, seeming to ignore the wicked winds being whipped up by the world-shaking power behind the clashing Kai blasts. "I'm Inyan," she added. Yamcha gave a nervous laugh. "And you said my name is dumb?" he asked teasingly. Inyan gave a wicked grin in response. "NGH's power is immense. What kind of training has he gone through?" Goku asked aloud, wincing as his Kamehameha was pushed back a few more inches, digging his heels against the cracking rock. Another shockwave burst from the beam struggle, shattering nearby boulders to dust and spreading more cracks along the grey rocky ground. "I won't lose to you, do you hear me?" Frieza yelled amongst the cacophony of explosions shattering the planet beneath them. He pushed the cataclysm strike forth another few inches with telekinesis, but Goku held strong. "You're so damn stubborn," Goku yelled, his muscles straining with the exertion of trying to maintain his Kamehameha wave. "NGH now or never, Goku, let's hope your body can handle this," Goku muttered to himself. He grit his teeth, and veins began to bulge out along his exposed skin. "Super Kaioken," he screamed at the top of his lungs. His aura flashed from gold to red, and then tripled in size, utterly decimating the ground behind Goku. A massive pulse shot up the length of Goku's Kamehameha, bursting through Frieza's own Kai ball. It struck Frieza, whose howls were drowned out by the blast, which carried him across the sky. The beam carried him for almost a mile before it drove into a patch of rocky earth, creating a white-hot dome of an explosion which left a deep molten crater in the rock. The boost having worn off, Goku slumped forward slightly and heaved for breath. "Oh man, I can't do that too often, I thought I was gonna explode," he grunted, before looking to the distant smoking crater. "I know you're still alive though." His normal gold aura flared up, and he quickly dashed toward the deep crater his blast had formed. Frieza emerged from the blast zone, his body covered with black burns and bleeding cuts. His chest rose and fell rapidly with powerful breaths before he managed to slightly steady himself. "Is that all you've got?" Frieza growled. "Is that all you've got?" In the middle of a battle-scarred field stood a flinting-wide arena, each corner marked by a white spear which jutted skyward. The ground was littered by downed airplanes and the husks of old tanks, destroyed because they attempted to destroy a being who was effectively a god when compared to humans. The one who smashed the Earth military stood stoic in the center of this white tiles of the arena. He was over 7 feet in height, his skin mainly green in shade with darker green splotches. His feet were chitinous black boots, and he had 2 sharp wings and wrist guards of a similar color. The skin on his face was purple, as were his hands. Beneath his eyes were 2 crimson red lines. He had 4 sharp cranial protrusions surrounding a black biogem atop his head. This being was Cell, the monster born by combining the DNA of heroes such as Goku, Vegeta and Piccolo, and the cells of villains such as Raditz, Cooler and King Cold. Quite a conflict going on over there, he mused, his eyes shut so that his Kai sense could better hone in on the massive battle taking place miles from Mount Paozu. "I do sorely wish to see it, but I can't just leave my arena, can I?" He looked around and gave a shrug to himself. "Fair. It's hardly going to sprout legs and run off," he mused, pressing 2 purple fingers to his brow. He honed in on one energy signature, then vanished in the blink of an eye. Cell reappeared beside Piccolo, causing all the warriors to jump and enter into their fighting stances. Cell Gohan grunted, clenching both his fists. "What the hell are you doing here?" he spat, narrowing his turquoise eyes. Slack clenched his fists, green fire sparking on his alien digits. "What manner of abomination is this?" the Namekian shaman asked, baring his fangs at Cell. He could sense the mixed Kai of several races all forcibly merged inside this being. The bio-android eyed Slack and Inyan curiously. He knew he sensed 2 unfamiliar energy signatures, but he never thought he'd see another Namek or a female Super Saiyan. "Well, isn't this a shock? Another Super Saiyan, honestly it's like a bargain sale with the rate you crop up," he remarked. "I'm Cell, the perfect being. And I'm here to see this battle between Goku and, well, according to my genetic memories, his opponent is Frieza." He watched, seeing Goku's knee crash into Frieza's stomach and sending the Arcosian crashing into the grey rocky ground which split apart on impact. Frieza hopped up quickly and fired off 2 narrow beams of red Kai from his eyes, which struck Goku in the chest with a powerful explosion. It burnt the remainder of Goku's white shirt to cinders and sent him flailing backward with smoking burns on his chest. "He's certainly stronger. He might actually beat Goku," Cell remarked. Not that he was afraid, Goku was barely a threat to Cell at full power right now. Gohan looked worried, biting his bottom lip in growing fear that Frieza would actually beat his father. "Damn it, Dad, you strained yourself too much with that Super Kaioken attack. You need to end this quickly before you totally run out of stamina, he thought. Piccolo, as if sensing the boy's worry, planted a large green hand on Gohan's shoulder to comfort him. Goku gave a loud yell of pain as Frieza's knuckle smashed his ribs, sending him spiraling downward. He corrected himself in time and blocked another incoming strike which shattered the earth beneath him. The Saiyan's pal shot up and struck Frieza in the brow, knocking him away. Ha, someone's been training. Frieza for his part seemed tired and sore too, but his breaths came far less ragged than Goku's own. Of course had to get stronger to beat you. But the universe kept throwing spanners in the works. A rebel army that destroyed my home planet, the reanimated remains of my brother Cooler, the legendary Super Saiyan, but I handled all of it. You lost your home planet? Goku asked, keeping his guard up for now. He was a trusting fellow, but he knew to take everything Frieza said with a hint of skepticism. The rumors said I had died on Namek, and that caused the long-dormant rebellion against my empire to spring to life. They blew my homeworld to atoms, and most of my species along with it. Frieza's sneer was fully visible through his shattered face mask, but I brought them back, with the Namekian Dragon Balls. Goku's eyes snapped open, and he roared, what did you do to the Namekians? Deep down there was fear in his stomach that Frieza had somehow forced the people of New Namek to give him immortality. I saved them from a malicious AI. Out of gratitude of the debt I had repaid, they allowed me to use their Dragon Balls to restore Arcos and her people. Frieza replied. He vanished like a white blur, completely vanishing from sight and reappearing straight behind Goku and going to slam his elbow into Goku's neck. He ducked swiftly and smashed his fist into the small of Frieza's back, sending him hurtling and crashing into spire of rock which collapsed to bits atop him. A blue Kai ball shot from Goku's palm, which blasted Frieza skyward, spurts of blood escaping the cuts that had opened up all across his once snowy skin. He righted himself and shot his index finger out, firing off multiple death beams which rained down like burning spears from heaven. Goku started flying about rapidly to swerve around the incoming blasts, flying through fissures and cracks in the rocky field, narrowly avoiding the explosions. Goku didn't know how he didn't see the bolt that exploded before him and sent him hurtling upward. Maybe he miscalculated his route, or he simply wasn't as fast as he thought he was. Didn't matter now, he mused as he struck the hard earth flat on his back. He hopped up just in time to avoid getting crushed under Frieza's food, the alien digits shattering the rock where Goku had been a mere moment earlier. The Super Saiyan lunged forth and swung a kick at the Arcosian's side. But Frieza began turning at a poor moment and Goku's leg connected with Frieza's arm just at the elbow. There was a horrid crack when the blow connected, followed by a deep hiss of agony from Frieza as his arm bent and twisted in a way biology never intended it to. Then his limb hung limply below the elbow, broken and utterly useless in the fight now. Then you think a broken arm will stop me? Frieza said, lashing Goku in the face with his tail and sending him tumbling backward through a boulder. You have no concept of what I've gone through to get here. If you think I'll give in from one lost limb, you are one stupid Saiyan. Trunks and Vegeta had left the time chamber earlier than expected, in need of new training gear after the damage that had been inflicted on the armors they did have. As soon as they stepped out of that door, they sensed the battle. How could they not? The energy they were putting out was enormous, and Frieza of all people was one of the Kai signatures. They dressed frantically, Vegeta roaring at his son, get a move on boy, before they both transformed and flew toward Mount Paozu, where the brawling was taking place. When they neared, he spotted Frieza. Transformed, yes, but unmistakably him. I told that fool Kakarot that Frieza would come back once he was left alive. Well, now it's time to end this foolishness. Time to die, Frieza, Vegeta roared, his golden aura flaring and his muscles bulging as he entered his ascended state. He flew down toward Frieza and Goku's brawl, but before he could anywhere close a fist struck him in the jaw and sent him flying backward. He sensed another Super Saiyan, and an Namekian for that matter, but he was so caught up in his hatred of Frieza that he didn't think to look out for them, and as such the blow caught him off guard. His fuming eyes settled on Inian, who grinned like a madwoman. She wagged her finger at him. Naughty little prince. Nobody's allowed to interfere with the boss man's fight. You dare strike your prince? Vegeta snapped. He supposed he was shocked to see a female Saiyan, one that could transform at that, but again he was briefly blinded by his hatred for Frieza and his attempt to show off his Super Saiyan wrath. Inian gave an indignant snort. Prince, oh what? Planet Vegeta's gone and your precious throne with it, you got no authority. Not like your old beardo father had any real authority, Lord Frieza was always calling the shots. She mocked. And sides, even if it weren't for all that I wouldn't serve the royal family after your dad sent me to die on that deserted hell planet. She added. Before Vegeta could snap and lash out, he heard a soft chuckle and looked to Cell. His cold eyes never left the battle between Goku and Frieza, but he knew full well what was being said. I think you feel you have something to prove after Frieza made you cry like a bitch all those years ago. Your tongue bores me, Vegeta. I look forward to tearing it out. Trunks glared at Cell, the monster that humiliated him when he attained his damn perfection, but he was also curious about Frieza's presence. Where was he in Trunks' timeline? Goku had no idea when it had started raining, all he knew was that it was getting heavier and starting to obscure his vision. He and Frieza were both swaying from fatigue and injury, and he knew it would all be over soon. Frieza had changed, he could tell. Saving the Namekians, working openly with a Saiyan and a Namek, and his whole demeanor in the fight, no taunts, no smirks, no games. He was determined, but was he determined enough to kill? Had he changed that much? Frieza lunged forth with a vicious snarl, shooting his good fist out toward Goku's head. The tired Saiyan narrowly avoided the fist and then swung his own up, smashing it into the open wound below Frieza's ribs, causing him to howl and thrash as a fresh spurt of blood coated Goku's fist. The tired warrior moved as fast as his fatigued body would allow him, catching Frieza by the tail and starting to spin him around rapidly before throwing him through a large mesa and cleaving it clean in half from the force. Frieza spun in the air and dug his toes into the rock, skidding back several meters before he stopped. His blazing garnet eyes settled on Goku, forming a glowing Kamehameha wave, which lit up the gloom of the gray battle-scarred rock land. "Oh no, you don't!" Frieza roared, kicking off the ground and soaring as fast as he could toward the incoming Kamehameha wave, his good fist pulled back and crackling with power. Frieza howled and shrieked in agony, the energy boring into his exposed wounds, blasting off 2 more of his horns and whatever shards remained of his face mask. Yet still he pressed on, yet he wouldn't give in. "Never, no, damn it, if I die you die first." He split the beam in two as he moved closer, snarling and roaring in rage and pain as he drew closer to Goku. Goku's eyes widened in shock, seeing Frieza was now only a few inches away. "Oh no way," he yelled, trying to break off. Sadly for him, here he acted all too late and Frieza's glowing fist caught him in the cheek. The Super Saiyan hit the earth hard, leaving a deep crater and sending tremors across the ground. Goku grunted in pain and tried to sit among the spiderweb of cracks his impact had formed. His hair flickered from gold to black and then his bangs fell before his face. "I'm beat. I just can't fight anymore," he said, laughing nervously and looking up at the advancing Frieza through his half-lidded eyes. Frieza was hunched, bleeding heavily from all his wounds, his broken arm dangled uselessly by his side, and his fifth form looked far less imposing with all his spikes and horns blown off. Still, he was in better shape to fight than Goku was right now. He planted his foot onto Goku's chest and shoved him flat on his back, then raised one finger up. "Now then, time for a much belated revenge on all the pain you've put me through." He spat, a glowing red spark of Kai forming on his index finger, the power radiating from it starting to raise a wicked wind. "And a punishment for your defiance against my family." Goku weakly managed to raise one arm up. "Frieza, wait," he yelled. Surprisingly, Frieza lowered his finger. "HMPH, last words, eh? Well, I suppose I owe you that much." Goku cast his gaze over to Gohan and the rest of his allies, poised for battle. He shook his head, still not wanting them to intervene. "Frieza, listen. The Dragon Balls have restored what you've lost, and you already proved yourself stronger than me. What will killing me accomplish?" The question gave Frieza reason to pause. What would it accomplish? He had nothing to avenge, and he was indeed the stronger right now. He grit his teeth and looked away. I don't know," he admitted, clenching both his fists. Goku gave a grunt and managed to sit up fully. "You've changed a lot from the monster I fought on Namek, I can sense as much. Are those two over there your friends?" Goku asked, gesturing to Inyan and Slack, who were still observing in the distance, ready to stop any interference in the battle. He hadn't thought much on it, but yes, Inyan and Slack, Midgio, Ace, Polari, even all the Shamoyan slaves he had freed, they were all his friends. Yes, I suppose they are. See, that right there, the fact that you have friends and can admit to it shows how much you've changed. Back on Namek, you would have called the grunts or lackeys," Goku said, grinning that silly dopey grin of his. "NGH Lee, listen man, we have a major threat to deal with right now." Cell, he pointed toward the dot on the horizon, and Frieza slowly turned to look over at him. Then he was suddenly before them, making Frieza and Goku lurch backward. He looks like cooler," Frieza said. It was the only thing he could think to say. His power was enormous, and Frieza just knew he was suppressed right now. "That's because I have your brother's cells inside me. And your father's. And Goku's, Vegeta's, Piccolo's, etc." He trailed off, smirking down at Frieza. Frieza sneered in disgust at this abomination who defiled the Snow King's bloodline with his mere existence. "I must admit, I'm a little disappointed. I expected a little bloodshed," he remarked in a bored tone. "Oh well. At least the honor of killing Goku will be mine. Yes, a tremendous honor. I believe I'll celebrate this honor by taking a trip of some sort when I'm finished," Cell muttered. His aura flared up, he gave a wave and a smirk to the two warriors before flying off into the sky. Frieza stood silently, watching the mutant soar off. Then he looked at Goku. "I want to kill that abomination," he said sternly. Goku grinned. Well, he's hosting a tournament called the Cell Games in a few days' time if you want to help us fight him. The others mightn't like it, but I'd like your help. He said. Right now he saw Frieza as the lesser of two evils, given just how damn powerful Cell was. Frieza nodded. Yes, well. I let you use the healing tanks on my ship. Newer models, more efficient than the ones on my flying saucer. It was at that moment that the group converged on the two weary warriors, Slack walking over and supporting Frieza on his shoulder. Easy, Lord Frieza. Your race are hardy, but not invincible. The shaman said, looking to his ally. Goku explained everything that had led up to Cell attaining his perfect form, to Frieza, Dr. Gero, and his quest for revenge, his android army, Cell absorbing the androids, and then coming up with the Cell Games. He even divulged some details on Trunks and his quest to save the future. Frieza had no idea what to think of the boy. His brother was alive again, so he could hardly be mad about that. And as of late he'd been questioning whether his father was a good man or not. He then went on to suggest Frieza and his allies aid in the fight against Cell, and the other had mixed looks of shock on their face. None were more against emotion than Vegeta. Kakarot, you blind stinking fool, you let this lizard live on Namek, and now you're letting him live now as an ally. I always thought you were stupid as a post, but never that you'd do something this stupid. We can't trust him, not for an instant. At this, Slack wrinkled his nose. You are not of a mind to judge Frieza, Prince of Saiyans. You have carried out his genocides, laughing as you destroy the cities of those who begged for mercy. What kind of penance have you done for your past? He asked, causing Vegeta to grit his teeth. Frieza has fought the legendary Super Saiyan and saved the universe from his violent rampages. He has saved the people of New Namek from a murderous computer when there was nobody else to come to their aid. This made Piccolo pause. Dan never mentioned such a thing when he was brought to the lookout. Many of you have committed crimes in the past, and you have been given chance to improve yourselves. He looked to Piccolo, Demon King. Then to Tien Assassin. Then to Yamcha Bandit. He finished. You have made up for your crimes. Please believe that Frieza has made up for his. There was a pause and a silence. I guess we need all the help we can get. Yamcha mumbled. If he saved Namek, then I can forget the past. And if an Namekian and a Saiyan can't serve at his side, then maybe he truly has changed. Piccolo said. The others soon fell in line, except for Vegeta, who scoffed and spat on the ground. Mark my words, I know he hasn't changed, he's still scum deep down. Give me an excuse, Frieza, and I'll kill you like the dog you are. Vegeta grunted out before flying off with Trunks in tow. There was a long silence. Dry Ame Abu Minion blurted out. The Snow King stayed adrift beside Kami's lookout, the egg-like ship comparable in size to the main palace atop the lookout. Inside the ship itself, Goku and Frieza were being healed of the wounds they had inflicted on each other. Inyan stood on the boarding ramp which connected the lookout and the spaceship, serving as a guard to anyone who would pose a threat to Frieza while he recovered. Yes, I can unlock your potentials. I believe so, at least. Slack replied, glancing over the Z fighters. I believe you require all the aid you can get against the Cell creature, thus I'll try to unlock as much power from all of you as I can. He explained. The group exchanged glances, and Gohan spoke up. Well, I know the old guru on Namek could unlock potential. I believe this guy should be able to if he knows all the magic he says he does. Piccolo sighed, and Dan did confirm his story about Frieza's exploits on New Namek, so he's trustworthy. Alright, I'm in. Anything to improve our chances in battle against Cell. The other Namekian remarked with a shrug of his broad shoulders. Thus every one of the Z warriors lined up before Slack to receive his power boost. Even Vegeta did so begrudgingly, unwilling to be outdone by any of these fools. The shaman unlocked the power of Tien, Piccolo, Krillin, Yamcha, Vegeta, Trunks, but he paused once he put his hand on Gohan's head. Is this something wrong? Gohan asked, looking up at Slack's turned face. He could hear the others laughing and testing out their new strength, feeling far more powerful than they had before. Slack pulled a hand back and gave a sigh. Your potential is massive, I must admit that. However, because of all that power, it is simply beyond my capacity to release your potential. But I know you can release this latent power once you bypass whatever emotional wall is holding you back. Slack explained. Gohan gave a small nod in response. How strong could he possibly be? Slack moved over to Piccolo, standing straight before the green being who was his equal in stature. I can sense elements of the warrior and the dragon clan inside you. The shaman said, hands behind his back. Piccolo nodded. My original form was a warrior. I merged with another warrior named Nail back when Frieza staged an invasion on Namek. And recently fused with a dragon clan Namekian named Kami, my counterpart. He explained, crossing his arms. Despite that, even with his potential unlocked, he only felt stronger than Cell's semi-perfect form. I see. Well, you have some mystic and combat capabilities, more than enough to learn the shaman's magic. Slack said, earning a strange look from Piccolo. At this, Slack grinned. Perhaps you doubt the potency of the magic's power. He held an open palm out, and a flower of emerald fire bloomed in his hand, the dragonfire of Purunga. So hot that it easily managed to melt the flesh of a foe roughly twice my strength. This shocked Piccolo, but he was even more surprised when Slack seemed to split in two. The shade of the Aegisa creates an illusion so real that even a person who can sense Kai would be briefly fooled. Briefly. He touched the replica of himself, who then disintegrated into dust which scattered to the wind. Then he raised both arms up and gave a grunt of exertion, black and green lightning surging up his forearms, and this is the lightning of Namek. He added finally, the lightning vanishing, it's good at restraining a foe for a brief while, even those stronger than you. He explained. I know many other things, Piccolo, things a warrior like you deserves to know. Piccolo was silent for a moment before giving a low sigh. Very well. Couldn't hurt to try. He replied before leading Slack to the hyperbolic time chamber. As everyone else went about their business, Inyan noticed Yamcha resting under the shade of the rows of palm trees atop the lookout. Hey Scars, she called out to him, causing him to look up. Aren't you gonna go train? Yamcha shook his head and gave a small laugh. Why bother? I'm hardly gonna be as strong as Piccolo or one of you Saiyans, even with my potential unlocked. Inyan rolled her eyes. Not with an attitude like that you want. She said, hopping onto the lookout and strolling toward Yamcha. Lem tell you a story of when I was a kid. I was born low class, a weakling in the eyes of my people. And I was constantly getting picked on and beat up by this elite bitch named Kalari. Lazy cow. Never trained and relied solely on natural ability. I always trained, intent on beating her, and when I did I forced the bitch her own teeth. You get what I'm saying here? Yamcha raised a brow. No, not really. Inyan gave a sigh. If you give up on your goals, give up on bettering yourself, then you'll never accomplish shit. She said, extending a hand out to him. She helped him to his feet and grinned wickedly at him. Come on, we're gonna go train on the ship. What? Me train with you, are you nuts? You'll paste me, Yamcha exclaimed, struggling against Inyan who was dragging him onto the ship by the wrist. Well, we'll never know if we never try, right? She said with a chuckle. On the other end of the lookout, Tien was quietly meditating and trying to ignore Yamcha's yelling. He pondered his newly developed strength and then thought of his battle against semi-perfect Cell. He felt he could have done much better now than he did back then. Cell smirked and slowly advanced toward Android 18 and the badly damaged 16, his lumbering steps punctuated by the clacking sounds of his various mechanical and biological joints. He paused and looked to the sky, feeling Tien's Kai rising. HRMPH, what does that no count think he's doing? He asked aloud. The only right thing, Tien began, clenching his fists. I'm stopping you. You fool. You've seen you're no match for me. Cell replied. Quicker than Cell could react, however, Tien was suddenly in front of him. The mutant's eyes widened in shock and he was soon spent flying across the island with one powerful kick which formed a large trench through where Cell passed. Tien whipped his head around and glared at the two androids. Get out of here, go, now, he snapped before turning back to where Cell was slowly standing up. 18 stood transfixed. How did Tien do that? From what her scanners told her, his power level hadn't changed at all. He shouldn't have budged Cell an inch with a strike like that. What was stranger was, Tien lacked the normal wide aura of a human. He had only a thick, barely visible outline of crimson around his body. It was genius, really, when he and Krillin finally had the realization on how to improve the Kaioken technique. The main reason the strain was so grand was because it caused a boost in all areas and subsequently strained every part of the warrior's body. So Tien suggested altering the technique to allow the warrior to control exactly what was boosted. He called it Zen Kaioken. With it, he managed to move 100 times faster than normal to intercept Cell, then delivered a kick 100 times stronger than normal to send Cell sprawling across the island. Only a person with masterful Kai sensing would notice the fluctuations. Cell gave a snarl and lunged at Tien, delivering rapid punches which the Triclops was only narrowly dodging, straining into the upper limits of this new technique. I won't let a worthless human like you humiliate me, he snarled. Tien gave a grunt and jammed one hand forth, increasing his strength and jamming his fingers through Cell's flesh. The bio-android howled in agony, and his howl turned to a shriek when Tien fired a gold Kai beam straight through Cell's piece torso, launching the mutant back a few feet. He regenerated quickly enough and lunged at Tien again and again, gradually pushing Tien further onto the defensive. While Zen Kaioken was marginally superior to its outdated predecessor, it did still cause strain in its users over time that gradually built up. Tien amplified his defense at the last possible moment, feeling Cell's fist smash into his stomach and sending him soaring into the island below him. He hit the rock with a thunderous crash, sending spiderweb-like cracks all across the earth. The martial artist gave a grunt and sat up, seeing Cell advancing on him with malice in his eyes. I'll break your fucking neck, human filth. Tien gave a grunt, seeing Piccolo unconscious on the shores of the island, being lashed by white waves. He thought to launch, the fear of losing her, then he tried to mentally calculate the androids might have gotten in the span of time it took Cell to gain the upper hand. They were safe now, surely. One Cell was close enough, Tien amped his speed up and chopped at Cell's eyes. There was a splatter of blood and gore as the Triclops hand sliced through Cell's eyeballs, splattering eye chunks on his hand. Cell was howling and clutching his slowly regenerating eyes. Tien rushed over and lifted Piccolo, carrying him as fast as possible from the island, as fast as his Zenkaiken could move him. Then they hit the earth several miles away, and Tien passed out with a strain. A useful technique, and if it was honed enough it just might be the human equivalent to the Super Saiyan. Paragus, despite being a weakling compared to his demonic groinspin Broly, possessed a common instinct of all Saiyans to grow stronger. As such he had invented a training chamber with gravity manipulating functions and highly dense walls to prevent damage to the ship's hull from Kai blasts and the like. It was here that Inyan had taken Yamcha for training, sealing the entrance hatch of the Snow King to ward off intruders who would do Lord Frieza harm. She had amped the gravity a little, then she transformed and she started sparring with Yamcha. Even with Zenkaiken, he was having a great deal of trouble keeping up with her, the majority of his attacks being either blocked or swatted away by the ebony Saiyaness. Yamcha gave a loud yell, swinging kicks and punches so fast that they blurred from sight. Inyan stepped back, pushed onto the defensive slightly by the onslaught of attacks. However, the split second she saw an opening, she leapt forth slightly and headbutted the human, sending him sprawling flat on his back, groaning in pain. "I told you you'd paste me," he grunted, rubbing the small bruise on his brow. "That's it, I quit," he grumbled. Inyan gave an annoyed sigh and rolled her eyes. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to play this card until later, dude." She trailed off and grinned at him. "For every successful hit you land on me, I'll lose a piece of my armor." At this, Yamcha sat straight up like an excited dog. "You're not pulling my leg, right?" he asked. Inyan pouted and leaned before him. "This is my super serious face," she said. Yamcha rolled back on his feet and breathed a sigh of exertion. "Okay, let's do it." He dove forth, delivering swift yet well-aimed jabs. Inyan was forced onto the defensive, raising her arms rapidly to deflect the hail of blows and having to sidestep to avoid several of the former bandits' attacks. He skidded around one uppercut from Inyan, and to the Saiyaness's shock, she felt a hard fist strike her in the cheek, which sent her skidding to one side. "Yikes, nice man," Inyan complimented, grinning and wiping a dribble of blood from her cheek. "Well, my good man, I do believe a deal is a deal," she said, trailing her fingers up to the straps on one red metal gauntlet, undoing them and letting the armor clang loudly against the floor. She grinned. "Then not bad, too bad for you. I'm going on the offensive now," she said with a giddy laugh before she lunged forth at a yelping Yamcha. Shortly after docking at Kami's lookout, Mid-Gyo had asked Goku if he could visit the most technologically advanced part of the planet. Goku suggested Capsule Corporation and helped give the lit directions, and following that he headed to an attack ball and flew toward the legendary building full of tech marvels. His reception had been icy to say the least. "I don't want any funny business. I was on Namek when Frieza was causing all the trouble on old Namek," Bulma explained as she led the avian alien through the corridors of the Capsule Corporation building. "I'm well aware of my lordship's abilities," Dr. briefs, "but if he had any plans he certainly wouldn't have sent me. He would have sent Slacker Inyan or even one of his handmaidens before sending me out to cause trouble," Mid-Gyo explained, eyeing the technology on display. "Just letting you know you're being watched," Bulma said sternly, leading him to the room where Android 16 was being held. "Hello 16, how are you feeling today?" the scientist asked. The partially damaged android, very close to being fully repaired, managed a smile. "Much better, thank you. Your father and yourself have done amazing work," the red-headed giant complimented. "Who is your friend?" he asked, his eyes shifting to Mid-Gyo. "Mid-Gyo, sir." The lit greeted an envoy of Lord Frieza. "I have come because the technology of this planet intrigues me so," he said. That seemed satisfactory for 16, who nodded and began conversing with Bulma. On the various screens in this hospital room, the lit could see the schematics of 16 and began to mentally analyze and dissect them. This giant was fully mechanical, unlike the others Goku had described, and were he to die against Cell, it seemed unlikely that he could be brought back by the Dragon Balls, for he had no soul. He supposed he'd need to create some way to preserve the android were he to die in battle against Cell. When the time came to head to the Cell Games arena, the group had gathered on the lookout's polished white floor. "Well, shall we be off?" Frieza asked, cracking the bones in his neck. He could tell the wary stares. Well, he supposed he was just as shocked to be working with them. "Good luck, Lord Frieza," Ace and Polari said in unison, bowing to the prince. They paused, then looked to the others before laughing nervously. "Good luck to you guys too." Mid-Gyo gave a small salute. "I'm working on something special, but I'll monitor events and give you all my support." Frieza nodded and then reached out to shake his hand. "You've been a stalwart ally and a true friend." Mid-Gyo shook without hesitation. Then Frieza walked over and hugged his two handmaidens. As for you two, I owe you much for your care, loyalty and service. Thank you. Goku grinned at the sight. Come on guys, we better get going. Vegeta landed at the edge of the Cell Games arena, watching two human imbeciles trying to mock Cell and goad him into striking them. One was a slender, spindly kinda guy with oiled black hair and a pencil-thin mustache accompanied by a cameraman, and the other was a tall well-built guy with an absurd afro atop his head. Neither had any idea what they were getting into. Android 16 landed next, his metallic boot surprisingly not raising any dust where he landed. I'm surprised to see you here 16. I thought you were as good as scrap. Cell remarked, recalling how casually he'd beaten him in the past. It was at that moment that Cell sensed Goku and his allies, and he promptly turned to their landing side. At last. Goku, Trunks, Tien, Yamcha, Krillin, Piccolo, Gohan who was dressed like Piccolo along with Frieza and his entourage. He only had tangential knowledge on Frieza from the genetic memories of some beings who had gone into his creation, and Cell knew literally nothing on Frieza's two allies. He'd have to be wary of them. Welcome to the battle. He said casually. Vegeta gave an annoyed scoff. About time they all got here. 16 strolled over to the group, the red ribbon logo on his chest now covered by a Capsule Corporation symbol. I wanted to thank you Krillin, thanks to you I've been repaired. Krillin gave a bashful laugh. That's good to know 16. Goku innocently reached a hand up to shake 16's own. Hey, let's all do our best. 16 scowled suddenly, his eyes growing cold and dim. I was originally built to destroy you. Don't forget that Goku. Goku blinked and then gave a nervous laugh. He started to stretch and look toward Cell. Well, shall we start this tournament with me fighting Cell? Is that okay with you Vegeta? He asked the shorter Saiyan. Vegeta gave an irritated grunt. Do whatever you want Kakarot, in the end I'll finish Cell off. Frieza seemed indignant, turning to glare at Goku. What? Why do you get to fight first? I've already proved my superiority to you, he grunted out, shaking a clenched ivory fist at the spiky-haired Saiyan. Goku laughed that normal airheaded laugh of his. Just trust me Frieza. I don't expect to win, but I do want to test his fighting ability. The news reporter cleared his throat and looked toward the group of Earth warriors. Excuse me. Are you all planning on entering the Cell Games? He asked. Goku gave a nod and another silly grin, which seemed to annoy and fluster the reporter. Stop this stupid joke, this isn't a game, you don't know what's going on here. Krillin looked completely deadpan. I think they're the clueless ones. Mr. Satan gave a bored shrug. Well, this is surprising, I thought even the most ignorant hicks knew who I was. I'm the world martial arts champion, Hercule Satan. The reporter proceeded to kiss ass. He's the world champ, a genius, the strongest man alive on planet Earth. Binyan gave a joyful squeal, and one could almost see the stars in her eyes. The strongest? Really? Ooh, that's so cool. Can I fight him, Lord Frieza? Can I? Aha, he's not all that strong. I mean, he's strong for an average human, but nothing like us. Yamcha remarked. He's got a PL of like 60. He added. This made Inyan frown in disappointment and caused Yamcha to laugh slightly. Well, you can fight me anytime you want. Especially if it's anything like our little training sessions. Krillin raised a brow at the two, before looking to Goku. Just let this Afro guy go first. I'm on already, Cell spat. Seems he had King Cold's impatience. A few moments of preening to the crowd from Mr. Satan followed, flashing his world champion belt to the crowd. He pulled out a capsule which formed a duffel bag from the plume of smoke, and from the bag he extracted and stacked 15 tiles. With a triumphant yell, Hercule smashed 14 of the tiles in a quick swipe, proceeding to brag about his strength. Tien pinched the bridge of his nose in distaste. This is the folly that passes for martial arts these days. Hercule gave a yell and leapt at Cell, with one arm pulled back to deliver the strongest punch he could muster. Cell rapidly swung one arm out and backhanded Mr. Satan clean from the ring without batting an eyelash. Pathetic. Piccolo gave a grunt. Well, he's alive if nothing else. I guess Cell didn't see any point in killing him. Slack blinked and rubbed his eyes to make sure he really had seen that ridiculous display. Earth is such a strange planet. Goku and Cell seemed to stare each other down quietly, nothing but the wind making any noise. Suddenly the two lunged at each other, their arms colliding hard enough to crack the ground beneath them. They started brawling upward, releasing shockwaves of power that could be felt on the ground below. They started vanishing from sight, only shockwaves appearing in the sky to detail where they actually were. Cell blocked a punch, Goku swerved to avoid a kick, Cell ducked to avoid a Kai blast from Goku, Goku flipped away through the air to avoid a vertical chop from Cell. Seemed neither could really outmatch the other. The two swung their fists out at the same time, smashing each other in the cheek and sending both backwards simultaneously. Cell recovered first and drove his knee into Goku's ribs, making him gag in pain. Then, quick as a flash, Cell drove an elbow into the back of the Saiyan's head, sending him spiraling downward through the air. Goku recovered just in time to dodge a death beam from Cell, which swooped past him and collided with the arena below, destroying several tiles on the arena floor. The two clashed in the air a few more times, Goku delivering a flurry of rapid punches to Cell's face, while Cell delivered two strong kicks to Goku's ribs. The duo landed on opposite end of the ring, staring each other down. Well, that's enough of a warm-up, wouldn't you agree? Cell asked. Goku merely grinned in response, and the two both powered up in unison, their gold auras clashing and shaking the earth beneath their feet. Incredible, the power of these two is beyond description, Piccolo remarked. Frieza's dark lips curled into a smirk. Well, it seems Goku had a little Zenkai from our battle. Nothing too immense though. The former tyrant remarked. The two super warriors clashed again, sending tremors across the vast wasteland. Cell had chosen to situate hit tournament, the brawl forcing them higher and higher up into the sky. Cell swung a kick out, but all he hit was an afterimage. Goku was right behind him and slammed his knee into the back of the mutant's skull, the force shattering one of his four black cranial protrusions and sending him hurtling downward. His wings shot out and halted his descent, and Cell spun rapidly to launch a destructo disc at Goku, who suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind Cell. The mutant, anticipating this, spun round and buried his elbow in Goku's chin, sending the Saiyan tumbling over a dozen meters upward. Two explosive red bolts of Kai flashed from Cell's eyes, sending Goku soaring even higher before he managed to halt himself. He turned and glared at Cell, entering into a familiar stance. "Me?" Cell's eyes widened in shock before he smirked. Haha, oh please Goku, I know you won't fire at me from there. You'll risk blowing up the whole planet. Goku gave a grunt, but his aura flared and the blue sphere of power kept growing in size. Me, that wiped the smirk off of Cell's face. Meanwhile at the outskirts of the ring, Krillin had gone white with fear. What do you guys think Goku's doing up there? He hasn't gone completely out of his mind, right? The bald monk asked. Likely he feels Cell is too powerful to be beaten. Frieza replied, folding his arms and watching the battle with a bored expression. He might feel destroying the planet is the best way to stop this being permanently. Of course if he has the cells of that Namekian and my father and brother, it will be an exercise in futility. The Kamehameha wave in Goku's hand continued to grow in power, and Cell wondered just what the hell Goku was planning. Would he really risk the earth? Quick as a flash, Goku appeared before the shocked Cell. He shot his hands up swiftly and roared out. The beam collided with Cell's upper body, and the mutant gave a garbled yell of pain as he was engulfed by the beam, the Kai blast continuing to travel and vanish into the sky. The charged energy wave had blown off Cell's entire upper body, leaving only a mangled pair of legs on the marbled arena floor. Minion pouted at the sight. Aw man, it's not over already, is it? Frieza shook his head. If that fool had aimed just a little lower, it just might be. But that pair of legs is still radiating energy. As Frieza had said, those legs did indeed contain all of Cell's power. They hopped up and stood erect of their own accord, and then in the span of seconds, the mutant's entire upper body had regenerated. A clever trick Goku, that instant transmission. Still, I won't fall for it again, and if you plan on wasting your Kai on non-lethal attacks, then this battle will get boring very quickly. Goku smirked in response, and the two beings lunged at each other once more, each landing a powerful punch or kick on the other for every meter they moved upward. Suddenly, Cell kicked Goku in the brow and sent him rocketing upward, and then was behind the spiky Saiyan, burying an elbow into Goku's jaw with such force that it sent him spiraling over a dozen meters away. Before Goku could react, Cell was behind him again, kicking him in the back of the head and sending him soaring away once more. It mightn't be instant transmission, but I'm pretty damn fast. Goku finally caught his breath, was panting for breath, and he looked up to see Cell with his arms crossed over his chest and a cocky grin on his face. I must say, you're giving me far more entertainment than I thought you would. It'd be a shame if it had to end if one of us were to fall from the ring, so let's remove the ring out rule. Cell remarked. Goku's eyes widened and Cell aimed one hand to the arena. Goku looked down to his allies. Get away from the arena, he's going to blow it up. The white flash flew from Cell's palm, lighting up the earth for miles around. In the span of a few seconds, Frieza had managed to transform into his super state and formed a dense wall of Kai that blocked most of the incoming force from hitting his allies as they doubled back. The machine known as 16 had swooped in and saved that small group of human fools from the blast, his giant form shielding them. Then he wordlessly rejoined the group once the light began to return to normal. Once the brilliant bolt had faded, the once glorious ring had been completely obliterated, leaving a crater so deep in the Earth's crust that the bottom couldn't be seen. Frieza's pale blue Kai wall vanished, and the Super Arcosian landed before the rest of the group. HMPH. I'm going to pull that mutant's head off for trying such a stunt against me. He added, blazing eyes glaring up at Cell. There. Now the whole planet is our arena. Cell remarked, dusting his hands. He certainly seemed pleased with himself, likely having no more fear of an unfortunate ring out. He dashed at Goku again, and their knees collided in a mighty display which sent powerful tremors across the battle-scarred wasteland. Goku swerved under one blow and dug his elbow into the side of Cell's neck, making him retch in pain as his windpipe buckled for the briefest of moments, only to regenerate a moment later. Goku went to deliver a kick, but quick as a flash Cell caught him by the leg and flung him into the uppermost layer of a dark brown mesa, leaving deep cracks along its surface. Stealing a move from Cooler, Cell dove down and smashed one foot between Goku's ribs. The Saiyan's yell of pain was quickly drowned out once the mesa fully crumbled and all the shattered rock began to collapse atop him. Cell drifted lazily through the air, his eye on the collapsed mound of rock HMPH. Come on out Goku, something like that couldn't kill you of all people. And indeed, Goku did burst up from the shattered earth over 100 meters away from Cell. Gold Kai orbs formed in the Super Saiyan's palms and a hailstorm of energy bolts flew at Cell, arcing through the air and smashing the mutant's body repeatedly. Each strike exploded against Cell's unnatural flesh, the blast sending Cell tumbling back over and over again, enraging him and burning his flesh. Lightning began to arc around Cell's upraised arms and soon the energy was spreading across the genetic android's whole body. A rumble came from his lungs, which evolved into a full-blown roar as he raised his arms up high above his head. A massive sphere of energy, crackling with lightning, surged out from Cell's body. It grew and grew until it was digging into the earth and its expansion caused Goku to break off his assault and double back. When the sphere collapsed to nothing, Cell was spending a few moments catching his breath. Goodness, I have to say Goku, enraging me enough to raise my shield. Most impressive. Those who were not warriors or those who had been warriors and went into retirement had gathered at Kame House to watch the live news coverage of the Cell games. There was an air of tension, seeing that Goku didn't seem to have any clear advantage over Cell. Well, do you think he can do it? Bulma asked aloud, feeling the need to do something to break the silence that gripped the group. Master Roshi adjusted his shades and proceeded to shake his head. I've known Goku since he was a monkey-tailed lad and I know he can't win this fight. He's getting tired, while Cell's regeneration will keep him fresh for the fight longer. The old master explained. A shudder crept up Bulma's spine. So he can't win? Bulma asked aloud. She gulped hard, that was some bitter medicine to swallow. Well, what does that mean for the others? Roshi stayed silent, for he knew that she had already come to the same conclusions he had. If Goku couldn't win, who could? Launch, currently in her blue-haired innocent state, gave a small whimper. Oh no, Tien, she murmured, one dainty hand unconsciously guiding down to her stomach. Cell folded his arms and drifted closer to Goku. The Saiyan warrior was heavily damaged at this stage, the top of his orange guy ripped to shreds and exposing his black undershirt. Well then Goku, are you ready to keep fighting? Trunks watched the battle with one fist clenched. Cell's getting tired. Quick, if we toss Goku a senzu he can go all out and end this, the lavender-haired youth said, looking to Goku and Cell in the distance. Shut your mouth, boy, Vegeta spat, glaring at his son, even a clown like him wouldn't want to win in such a cowardly manner. He added with a low grunt. Goku gave a silly grin and looked Cell dead in the eye. I surrender. Everyone took in a sharp breath in disbelief at what they just heard. What does that damn clown think he's doing? Vegeta snapped. Does he have any idea what he's just done? Piccolo asked aloud. Moron. Frieza muttered. Is he out of his mind? Tien and Yamcha yelled in unison. Cell tilted his head. Goku, surely you understand the implications of what you just said. If nobody will fight me, the earth will be destroyed. The machine mutant said. Oh, make no mistake, there's someone else lined up to fight you. Someone I know can beat you. Goku replied casually. Everyone leaned in, wondering who he meant. Vegeta. Frieza. Trunks. See, I spent this whole fight trying to gauge your strength and from what I've seen, well, I can't win, but I know he can. The Saiyan added. Cell sneered. Oh, is that so? And just who is this individual who has no right to exist? Goku pointed to the crowd and his finger came to rest on Gohan. Hey Gohan, it's your turn to fight. The group turned sharply to look at the half-Saiyan youth who seemed every bit as shocked as his allies were. Had his father gone completely off his rocker? But God, we're doomed, Frieza murmured. Eyes, Gohan's actually a lot stronger than I ever imagined. I learned as much in the hyperbolic time chamber. Goku remarked. He glanced to Piccolo quickly. Piccolo, you of all people should know Gohan's hidden might. The Saiyan remarked. Piccolo glanced to his young pupil and first friend before nodding slowly. Now that Frieza thought about it, that boy did have immense power linked to his rage. He'd actually harmed the Arcosian Prince in his second and third forms without need to transform into a Super Saiyan. It's true, he has a grand potential. To the point where it was beyond my abilities to unlock his power. Slack chimed in, folding his green arms over his torso. Goku gave a small nod and then looked over to his son. Tell me son, did you think it was hard to monitor my battle with Cell or could you follow our movements? He asked. Gohan gave a nod to indicate that he followed the battle easily enough. Well yeah, but you both weren't going all out, right? He asked. Goku gave an airheaded grin. Well, I don't know about Cell, but I was fighting with all I had. Did it seem to you like I was holding back? Gohan stayed silent and everyone seemed shocked by Gohan's power. Yikes, to think a half-breed could be that powerful. Inyan remarked, peering at the lad. Go on Gohan, restore peace to the planet. Goku said, patting his son on the back affectionately. He knew full well he hadn't been the best, most attentive father, but now more than ever he wanted to show his faith and pride in his son. Gohan looked determined. I'll do my best, Daddy said, tossing his weighted white cape off and flying over to meet Cell in battle. The youth entered into a fighting stance, clenched both his fists. His golden aura began to flicker, and it surged incredibly in size, Gohan giving a primal yell that rose in volume as his aura rose in power. The earth rending beneath his feet, and even Cell seemed blown back an inch or two from the powerful winds. The gathered Z warriors were shocked. Gohan had surpassed all of them. Is that really Gohan? He's become so powerful. Well, I'll be damned. Frieza said simply, blinking. Cell didn't waste time on pointless banter. He lunged at Gohan and swung a chop out which he easily blocked. He tried to kick Gohan's feet out from under him, but the young half-Saiyan leapt over easily and flew skyward. Cell took chase and went to deliver a haymaker, but Gohan backstepped away and avoided the strike deftly. Past little bastard, guess I'll have to use my full speed against you, Cell snarled, dashing at Gohan. His fist struck Gohan's gut, winding him and forcing him to drop his guard. He caught the halfling by his collar, repeatedly headbutting him till small dribbles of blood ran from Gohan's brow. Cell shot an arm forth and struck Gohan with a powerful telekinetic force, smashing Gohan through a large rock formation which collapsed atop the youth. The others stayed dead still. Cell seemed smug. HMPH. Perhaps I used a little too much power, he was just a child. It's hard to believe you have any of my family's DNA when you're so incompetent at killing, Frieza mocked, watching Gohan rise from the rubble. He looked a little beat up, bruised and dirty, but more than that he looked determined. Cell gave an annoyed grunt. I'll show you just how good I am at killing Frieza, soon enough. But first he turned to face Gohan fully. Despite the large height difference, Gohan seemed confident and stood tall. Please, let's stop. This fight is completely meaningless. Gohan said, clenching his fists which hung at his sides. Cell seemed mildly irritated, but was soon laughing. Meaningless? Well, dear boy, it has plenty of meaning. For me, it's a form of entertainment, and for you it's a chance to save the pathetic lives of the humans. He explained. Gohan shook his head. I simply don't like fighting. I'm not like my dad. Cell gave a laugh. Are you sure you're not just making excuses, since you realize the futility of fighting me? You're strong, boy, but I don't see why Goku had faith in you beating me. Gohan was silent, but eventually he spoke up. I think I understand what my dad saw in me. Ever since I was a little kid, whenever I got really angry I'd explode with hidden power I couldn't normally draw upon. I guess that's why my dad has faith in me. Cell's smirk grew into a psychotic, malicious grin. That was a mistake to say, boy. Now I'm going to piss you off to see if there's any truth to that. Quick as a flash, Cell had roundhouse kicked Gohan across the dusty wasteland. He dashed after Gohan and punched him clean into the air. He dashed skyward and, stealing a move from Tien, smashed Gohan down to earth like a volleyball. Get mad and show me your real power. He shot down after Gohan, but the young halfling corrected himself in time to kick Cell down to earth, where he crashed into an ungraceful heap. He hopped up swiftly and wiped some purple blood from his burst lip. He gave another smarmy smirk and raised an index finger, firing a purple death beam at Gohan, which the half-Saiyan narrowly dodged. Ah, that's Frieza's technique, Krillin said, recalling how casually it had snuffed out the lives of several warriors. My family's technique. Frieza corrected, his glowing garnet eyes straining to follow Gohan's movements, nimbly dodging a barrage of the blasts. He lacks my cells, remember? But my father and brother both knew the technique well enough. He explained, it's been a part of the bloodline for so long that the attack's origins are unknown. All that is known is that its earliest wielders were so fearful of traitors that they killed off members of their royal court so often that they needed a quick execution attack. Gohan leapt up, about to dive at Cell. The mutant vanished and appeared behind Gohan, his pointed tail uncoiling like a whip and curling around Gohan, who gagged in response. Cell started to cackle, his fist swinging out and using the suspended boy as a punching bag, the echoes of his punches ringing through the wasteland. Doesn't it hurt, boy? Cell spat, punctuating every word with another strong punch. Get mad, you'll die otherwise. Get mad. Gohan could only muster weak gasps in response, his throat being given very little air. Damn it Goku, he's going to kill him strongest or not, he's still a child, he can't think on getting angry like you're expecting him to, he's wondering why the hell his father is standing back to watch his torture. Piccolo snarled, tossing his weighted cape and turban aside, I don't care what you say, and I don't care if I can't harm him, I'm still going to try fight him, Piccolo added. The dragon fires of Purunga spiraling up his forearms. Goku was silent. Had he been wrong? Krillin, quick, toss me a senzu bean he said, glancing to the bald monk. Alright. Krillin said, pulling the brown bag of senzu beans from his guy. Suddenly, Cell released the grip of his tail, letting Gohan fall flat on the ground. The mutant watched Gohan struggle onto his hands and knees, a sneer on his face. Stubborn, aren't you? Very well, if your own pain won't piss you off maybe I need to hurt your friends. He dashed at the other Z warriors, while Gohan screamed in protest. Even with Zen Kaioken, Krillin wasn't fast enough to stop Cell snatching the pouch from him. Senzus eh? Cell asked, floating backward. Well, these could get in my way, so I think I'll be taking them. He added. The mutant landed my Gohan, crushing the bag in his purple fist. Ah, what are you doing? Gohan yelled, getting to his feet, his teeth clenched. Stop trying to get me mad, I won't be able to control myself. Cell gave a titter of laughter and turned to the Z fighters gathered on the rocky hill. Well, I'll have to hurt your friends and get you mad, just to see what truth there is to that statement. Gohan snarled and leapt at Cell, only for the creature to spin around and kick Gohan back into the dirt. Come on, if you want to get pissed at me, then you should go all the way. Suddenly a pair of strong arms wrapped around Cell's waist, restraining his arms to his sides. NGH, 16. Release me at once, Cell roared, glaring at the lumbering machine. 16 ignored the so-called perfect lifeform, shouting out to the other Z warriors, I'm sorry it has come to this my friends, but I see no other options. I plan to detonate myself along with Cell with my self-destruct device. What? Cell spat. If the explosion were big enough, powerful enough, well it could eliminate all of his cells, nullifying his regeneration. 16 gave a growl, prepped to blow both of them to kingdom come, but nothing happened, not one thing. NGH what? Why can't I activate my self-destruct device? 16 yelled, looking frantically. Cell's worried expression grew into something more malicious. 16, you can't self-destruct because Bulma's father removed the bomb in your chest, Krillin yelled from his position across the wasteland. 16 whipped his head around, his eyes, while robotic, were capable of conveying such emotion and horror. When he was repairing you, he saw the bomb in your chest, he thought it was out of place, so he removed it. A haughty laugh escaped Cell's lips. Oh, sorry to hear that, 16. Well, we can't all be winners. Cell remarked. His stinger jammed into 16's stomach, forcing him to grunt and release his grip. Cell's hand showed forth and in one spectacular bolt of energy, he reduced 16 to scrap metal and a disembodied head. Before 16's cranium could hit the dirt, the mutant swung a foot up and kicked him away like a football, his head bouncing off the rocks until it neatly landed at Mr. Satan's feet. He glanced back to the crowd once he made the field goal. Now then, he mumbled, counting the group, 10 of you. Simple. Cell replied. His tail tip opened wide and the machine mutant gave a grunt. Suddenly several disgusting little things were shot out of the open tail tip, 10 miniature versions of Cell, the only difference being their stature and their skin being pale blue instead of their father's forest green. What are they? Piccolo asked, his facial expression a mixture of shock and revulsion. Cell began, looking to his chittering offspring. Cell Juniors, attack that group on that hill. Hurt them, kill them if you want, I hardly care. The 10 Cell Juniors gave a chorus of gleeful cackles and swooped skyward, launching themselves at the Z warriors, who all entered into their fighting stances. Problematic, very problematic. Mid-Gio tutted, watching his monitors. He'd set up a link to 16 systems so he could monitor everything that had happened to his body. In the span of a nanosecond, everything from the neck down had gone offline. Well, better get to work on creating the new body. Mid-Gio mused, walking over to another computer bank, past a computer chip he had designed which was constantly copying 16's memories, effectively making a duplicate of his brain. He typed in several commands to his advanced machinery, an army of metal hands getting to work using the reverse-engineered Big Jeet Star technology Mid-Gio had working on creating a duplicate of 16's body. More powerful, sturdier and with better energy manipulation capabilities, along with a touch of regeneration. Very potent indeed. The Cell Jr. had targeted each warrior individually, and right now it seemed Frieza was the only one capable of matching one toe-to-toe, as Goku had spent his energy against the father of these stumpy bastards. Krillin was pushing his speed with Zen Kaioken to the upper limits, but even then he had to focus solely on dodging attacks and could make no accurate counter, as was the case for Tien and Yamcha, who were gradually being forced backward by their opponents who cackled wildly as they swung out their punches and kicks. The lucky kick and Krillin was sent flying back. With an amazing speed he was suddenly behind the monk, kneeing him face first into the earth. Tien managed to narrowly sidestep one strike and elbowed his Cell Jr. in the back of the skull. The midget yowled, but quickly righted himself and shoulder charged Tien through a large mound of stone. Yamcha delivered a powerful palm strike to his foe, shattering his nostrils and making him shriek like a pained monkey, before catching his arm and shapping it at the elbow, making Yamcha howl like the wolf he based himself on. Yamcha Inyan yelled in shock, distracted just long enough for her foe to roundhouse kick her into the air, followed up by a powerful bolt of yellow light, the ensuing blast sending Inyan hurtling even further away. The junior that had targeted Slack gave a cackle and flung a punch, but was confused when all he hit was smoke. From the darkness, Slack's arm stretched out as if it were rubber, knocking his foe in the cheek and sending him hurtling away in a daze. The Cell Jr. righted himself and fired out a red Kai beam, just as Slack went to swerve. The beam struck him at the right shoulder, and Slack howled as his entire right arm was blown off by the blast. He righted himself and glared at his snickering foe. "I'm not out yet." Slack growled. Vegeta landed 3 powerful punches in rapid succession to his foe's face, blooding his face up and making him snarl in irritation. He swooped under Vegeta's fist and kneed him in the diaphragm. The prince was winded and stumbling backward. Taking advantage of Vegeta's daze, the offspring began cackling and delivering flurries of punches and kicks to Vegeta's face and torso, making him stagger backward. Trunks managed to slam both his fists down onto one Cell Jr.'s head, smashing him through the rock below. He started firing rapid bolts of golden Kai down the chasm his foe had formed, widening it and causing geysers of Kai to blast skyward. The split second he stopped firing, a battle-damaged, pissed-off Junior burst from the ground, slamming both feet into Trunks' face and sending him flying and crashing into a large spire of stone. Goku was yelling in agony, getting kicked about like a ragdoll by his own foe. He'd blown too much power against a real Cell, could barely raise a defense against this creature. 2 small feet connected with his jaw and sent him tumbling backward into a heap on the rocky ground. Frieza's arms moved like blurs, blocking all incoming strikes from the little bastard who had decided to test himself against a former prince. He deflected one punch and elbowed his Cell Jr. away, only for him to bound back and rapidly punch Frieza repeatedly in the ribs, making him stagger back and snarl in pain. He shot a knee up and launched his Cell Jr. into the sky, then a flash of red escaped his glowing ruby eyes. The Cell Jr. shrieked as his flesh was stripped from his bones by the powerful eye beams, and then his bones themselves were turned to nothing by the attack. The 2 juniors who had been kicking Yamcha and Tien about broke off at their siblings' death shriek, launching themselves at Frieza. Despite his best efforts, he simply couldn't fend off the attacks of 2 of the beasts, and they started smashing him around Throtty Sky, like a brutal game of pinball, before one elbowed him into the earth with a thunderous crash. One of the creatures loomed over the briefly downed Frieza, forming a miniature supernova on one finger. He gave a snicker, ready to launch the ball, but suddenly he was struck from behind by a plume of jade fire. The creature began shrieking and thrashing about, his flesh beginning to melt like plastic, and no matter how hard he tried to pour saw just couldn't beat the flames out. Eventually he fell to earth as a puddle of molten sludge, which then too became nothing. Slack, Frieza asked, sitting up. To his shock, the one who saved him wasn't Slack, but Piccolo, who was holding his foe in a choking grip with one hand and holding out a flaming jade fireball with the other. The second Cell Jr. smashed himself into Piccolo's ribs, making him howl and release his own foe, the 2 juniors, now mashing themselves into Piccolo and beating him backward. Gohan gave a bestial growl, hearing the yells of Piccolo and Goku as the Cell Juniors thrashed them about like ragdolls. You better get angry quickly. Your friends may have killed 2 of my children, but it's only a matter of time before they're all overwhelmed. Their speed is so grand that if they manage to get one hit on they'll never stop punching. Cell remarked. Across the dusty wasteland, Hercule and his camera crew were looking on in shock. This is insane, Hercule choked out in shock. We need to get out of here while we still can, his reporter ally yelled out, sweating profusely in fear. Just as they went to leave, however, 16's decapitated head spoke up. Wait, the group stopped in shock, peering down at the talking head. Before you go, I need you to get me close to that boy over there. He explained. What? Are you out of your mind? He's standing right next to Cell, Hercule exclaimed. 16 managed a smile despite his current situation. Don't you want to be a hero? I expected the world martial arts champion to be brave. Hercule grimaced. Fine, I'll do it. If I run away now, I'll wind up as a laughingstock. He said, calling on all his courage and plucking the android's head up and starting to sneak along. Yamcha was howling in pain, his foe stomping on his broken arm. Inyan was pinned beneath her own foe's feet and their crushing force. Vegeta gave a grunt, getting kneed in the face every time he tried to stand up. Cell briefly glanced to Gohan, tears running down his face, and gave a grin. Just one more push. He looked back to his offspring. That's enough playing around, kill them. Just as Cell said this, 16's head clattered noisily and landed between Cell and Gohan. S16, is that you? Gohan asked in disbelief. Gohan let it go. 16 said simply, there is no sin in fighting for what is right. There are those who words alone will not reach. Cell is such a being. He paused, Gohan trembling slightly. I know how you feel. You are gentle, you don't like to hurt. I know, for I too feel such feelings. But because you cherish life, you must protect it. Cell gave a disgusted snort, this sentimental nonsense grows tiresome. He remarked, clanking over to the android's cranium. So nice that you want to help draw out Gohan's power, but we're going to do things my way. 16 managed to smile at Gohan. Please, let go of your restraints. Protect the world I love. You have the strength, my scanners have sensed it. Just let it go. Those were 16's last words, as Cell's monstrous foot came crashing down, splattering 16's artificial skull. Gohan's eyes widened. The light on 16's computer chip went blank. Before Cell could gloat, Gohan released a primal yell to the heavens. His aura flared to life, illuminating the battlefield golden in its light. His hair shot up, becoming spikier and even more rigid. Lightning sparked around his whole body, and his power grew so vast that it dwarfed the Kai of all those around him. These changed. Cell muttered dumbly. I'm going to make you pay. For everything you've done. Gohan growled. He moved like the lightning surrounding his aura, snatching the senzus from the machine mutant's hand. Before Cell could snatch them back, Gohan had already dashed to the Cell Jr. flock. He plowed his fist through the skull of the Cell Jr. looming over Krillin, his headless body landing with a thud. The shock caused all the other juniors to look away from their foes in shock. Seeing an opportunity to strike, Trunks transformed into his ultimate Super Saiyan form and smashed both his fists into the sides of his enemy's skull, splattering it too. Slack leapt up and in one burst of jade fire, he completely immolated his own enemy. In the span of a few seconds, Gohan had torn apart the remaining juniors with his bare hands, leaving them splattered about. Everyone was shocked, none more so than Cell. Goku gave a weak pained laugh. He take that, Cell. Told you he was stronger than you. Frieza stood up fully, rubbing the purple bruises on his ivory skin, his strength it's enormous. Frieza mumbled in shock. Gohan tossed the senzus to the Arcosian Lord, who caught them quickly enough. Distribute them as best you can. Gohan said simply. He flew back to Cell and landed silently, glaring at a very fear-stricken Cell. The tension was so thick that it could be cut with a knife, the only noises being the swirling and crackling in Gohan's newly acquired SSJ-2 aura. Cell gave an irritated growl at the sight of the insanely powerful boy before him. Don't think a few sparks of electricity make you strong enough to defeat me, you brat. Cell grunted out through clenched teeth. Gohan kept that grim mask of determination on his face. I'll defeat you. He answered simply. Cell's eyes widened slightly, though he tried to hide his worry and indignation. Big talk, but I'll show you just how powerful I am. He gave a roar and began to power up, kicking up a small dust storm. His golden aura bathed the earth in its glorious light. Gohan stayed unmoved by the powerful earth-rocking display, even though his allies were being blown away. So this is Cell's full power? Frieza asked aloud. Cell gave a cocky laugh. Well, what do you think, boy? This is me being serious. He growled, entering into his fighting stance. Is that all? Gohan asked bluntly, his expression unchanging. Cell's eyes twitched and an enraged snarl escaped his lips. He lunged at Gohan with one arm outstretched. He hit the teen, who staggered back about a foot. For a brief moment he smirked until Gohan stood up fully again. He roared and swung again, but Gohan caught his fist and sent his own smashing into Cell's gut, winding the mutant and making him stumble backward. In a desperate counter-attack, Cell made an awkward chop, but Gohan ducked under his arm and leapt up, striking Cell in the chin with a mighty uppercut that sent Cell sprawling onto his back. The mutant dropped, the dark blood trailing down his purple face that seemed to grow even more purple from his growing rage. 2 hits, how could 2 hits hurt me so badly? He grunted to himself. You little bastard, Cell snarled, standing up fully. Gohan began to advance on him, and in a bout of sudden fear, Cell swung a kick at Gohan's skull. He deflected the blow casually with his forearm and proceeded and responded by delivering a kick of his own to Cell's face, sending him skidding along the dirt, whereupon he landed in a bruised heap. Holy shit balls, Inyan said aloud, her jaw hanging open. A Super Saiyan 2, no legends like that ever appeared, and to think it was accomplished by a half-breed. Goku gave a small laugh. I told ya, Gohan has some amazing strength hidden inside him. Frieza crossed his arms over his chest. Yes, well, you certainly didn't disappoint in that regard. Still the Super Arcosian trailed off, his eyes watching Cell scramble to his feet. Your boy has more than enough power to end this easily, why is he wasting time? The news of 16's head being pulped had reached Mid-Geo a split second after it happened, and the replica of 16's memory chip stopped downloading data just as that happened. Ah, a grand shame. Good thing I planned ahead. Mid-Geo murmured to himself. The new body was just about finished. It looked fairly similar to 16's original body, but with two noticeable differences. Midgio, finding the shade of green on 16's armor to be repulsive, had made his new armored component silver in color. Second, he had made sure to engrave the Capsule Corporation logo into his chestplate as opposed to his original Red Ribbon Army logo. Wordlessly he plucked the new chip up and handed it to one of the robotic arms, which started moving toward the tank containing the duplicate of 16's body. The chip was slipped into 16's skull, and then the last adjustments were made to the new body before Midgio pressed the button that would breathe new life into his cloned android in a flourish of energy. 16's eyes opened slowly. I can feel my body. I dreamt that I was dead, or is this the real dream? He stopped and looked down, spying Midgio. Your death was quite real, sir, but is this thankfully? I imagined the Dragon Balls could not restore a creature such as yourself because well, philosophy and theology are such gooey subjects to get into, but I doubt an android has a soul. Midgio explained. 16 pondered the avian aliens for a moment and slowly stepped out from the tank. His body had been constructed in the battle against Cell, is it? Midgio cut him short. Still going, yes. But for the time being I believe you should stay back. Going by what Ace and Polari have told me over the comm systems, your death is what gave Gohan the power he's now using against Cell. Midgio explained. Your arrival may well cause him to power down. He understood very little about Saiyan transformations, only that emotion is what influenced them. I see. 16 went silent once more, as he so often did, and then a realization seemed to hit him. I no longer feel the desire to kill Goku. What is the meaning of this? He asked, glaring silently at the bird, who seemed unflinching. If he no longer feared Frieza as much, he certainly couldn't fear the world's gentlest giant. I removed any predetermined goals your creator left for you. As of now you have free will. Midgio explained, a smile etching onto his features. 16 kept the same stoic expression, and then he too managed a smile. Come, let us go to watch Son Gohan's victory over Cell. The giant said, plodding behind Midgio as he was led around the Snow King. Gohan was advancing on Cell again, slow as could be. He could outrun Cell easily at this stage, why rush himself at all? Cell's eyes widened in a mixture of horror and pain, and he felt he only had one chance to win. He had to fight Gohan in a different manner. He couldn't fight head-on like a Saiyan, so he'd have to win through subterfuge like an Arcosian. He shot up into the sky like a rocket, cupping his arms to his side in a Kamehameha stance. Gohan merely watched his ascent and the gathering of his Kai. The gathered heroes stared in shock, feeling the magnitude of Kai building between Cell's hands. For a brief moment, Cell's eyes lingered on Slack, who had a sphere of green fire in his hand, ready to strike. Soon it will descend upon us all, Frieza said grimly, his body growing rigid in fear. For once, he and Vegeta seemed to have something in common. It's over, he whispered, the massive full-power Kamehameha being launched from Cell's hands down toward Gohan. If he dodged, the earth would be destroyed. But with the Arcosian abilities in his body, Cell would live on. Gohan seemed stoic, unmoving as his body was bathed in the glorious light of the might Kamehameha wave. Then at the last seconds his own arms shot up. Kamehameha, he yelled, a beam even larger than Cell's shooting up and clashing against the mutant's beam. Gohan's energy blast seemed to rapidly overwhelm Cell's own attack, traveling into the sky much to Cell's immeasurable shock. It struck Cell, and a vast wave of Kai seemed to travel into the stars themselves, until it finally vanished. When the onslaught of power ended, Cell looked a mess. Missing 2 legs and 1 arm, all 4 of his cranial protrusions reduced to molten stumps, he was trembling with terror and rage. Why does he have so much power? Gohan gave a cocky smirk, as if to offer an answer. Finally, Goku called out across the wasteland, Gohan, what are you waiting for? Finish him off, now, he yelled out. Gohan rolled his head to the side to look at his father. Finish him? No, Dad, not yet, he needs to suffer more. Gohan replied grimly, narrowing his eyes at Cell. What are you saying? You're the only one with the power to stop him, stop messing around and finish him off, Goku yelled back. As he spoke, Cell's blown-off limbs grew back into place with bursts of vile green fluids. He looked good as new once again. Cell's face contorted and showed such rage that it was a miracle that the veins bulging on his brow didn't explode. You little shit, you little shit, you little shit, he screamed to the heavens, and his muscles bulged out to absurd, ape-like proportions. His analog to the Ultra Super Saiyan form that Trunks had developed. The earth split and shattered beneath his giant feet when he landed, and he gave a deep-voiced cackle. Haha, no way, I'll lose to you now. He started swinging slow, awkward punches at Gohan, who was dodging with even less effort now than he had used against Cell before bulking himself up. Oh, his blows were powerful to be sure, shattering whatever rock his fists happened to collide against. In the end, however, Cell just lacked the speed. Gohan dashed at Cell and smashed a knee into the mutant's temple, making Cell gag and retch, his eyes going off in different directions. He seemed to be getting sick. Indeed he spewed up something, but not vomit, he spat out the unconscious Android 18. Cell was as shocked as everyone else. Then, in the blink of an eye, Cell had reverted to his ugly semi-perfect form. Gohan crossed his arms. How sad. Looks like this really is the end for you. Cell's frog-like eyes were bulging from his skull. I won't let you win, he roared. His body seemed to balloon up in size, growing fatter and even more grotesque than the shambling abomination, the mutant born from the strongest races in the galaxy. Cell started to laugh. Haha, this is the end of you bastards. In 1 minute's time, I'll explode with enough force to wipe out the planet. What? Vegeta gasped out, taking a step back. Did he just say he's going to explode? I won't let you go, Gohan yelled, rapidly entering his fighting stance. Cell wagged one of his fat bloated fingers. I wouldn't if I were you, boy. If you attack me, I'll blow up on the spot. Gohan froze in horror. What had he done? Had his folly doomed the entire world? Ah, no way, Polari shrieked, watching the feed from the Snow King's video probes. He's going to blow up the whole planet out of spite. What a dick. Ace growled. Very like Cell. A creature like him, he would rather die by his own hand than be killed by the creatures he views as being lesser than himself. 16 chimed in. His mouth was a hard thin line on his face, and it was hard to read meaning into his expression. What are we going to do? Polari asked, glancing to the others. Not much we can do. A said grimly, it'll take too long to get the ship system started up. He blows, we go with him. She explained. She didn't want to show it, but tears were stinging her eyes. So this is it? Midjayo asked weakly. Polari buried her face into Midjayo's shoulder and started sobbing openly. I don't want to go. Wahaha, 30 more seconds, Cell bellowed out, his fat gut expanding every second. Now he was even larger than the ultra form he had used earlier. The others said silent prayers, needing some sort of miracle to save them from this nightmare. Gohan smashed the earth with his fists, cursing his earlier stupidity and arrogance. Vegeta had made the same mistake and allowed Cell to gain his perfection. Why was he such a fool that he didn't learn from the past? Goku, quite calmly, looked back to all the friends and allies he had gathered over the years. Friends and rivals, some who had been with him since he was but a boy. He smiled warmly at all of them. His friends looked at him in shock. How could he smile now of all times? Gee Goku, what are you doing? Krillin asked. Sorry guys, but this is the only way I can think of to save the Earth. Goku answered. He placed 2 hands to his brow. By you guys. By the time they realized what Goku was planning, it was too late. Krillin screamed after him, but Goku seemed not to hear. He landed between Gohan and Cell and grinned at his son. You did great, son, I'm real proud of you. Gohan blinked in shock. Father? He asked in shock. His hand rested on Cell's gut. Tell your mother I'm sorry. Goku said. And then in a flash the two were gone, spirited away by instant transmission. Ah Goku, are you out of your mind? King Kai yelped, he and his 2 housemates jumping back with him. Goku gave a nervous laugh, his feet resting on the familiar grass of King Kai's planet. Sorry King Kai, this is the only place I could think to bring him. He answered simply. Cell gave a monstrous garbled roar as he finally exploded, taking Goku, King Kai, Bubbles the monkey, Gregory the cricket and King Kai's planet with him. And inadvertently released another horror into the galaxy. Piccolo lowered his head slowly, releasing a small exhale. It's done, Goku's Kai has gone, he said simply. The others lowered their heads in silent prayer for the noble hero who died for the Earth. Father Gohan screamed out, futilely punching the earth. He did this, he caused his father's death because of his own hubris. Shit. Frieza gazed at where Goku had stood a mere moment ago. Where had he taken Cell? Hardly mattered, he supposed. What mattered was that it was over. The Super Arcosian said a silent prayer to whatever gods were listening to treat Goku with respect. A true hero, until the very end. Finally he, Inyan and Slack followed behind Trunks and Vegeta to rejoin the others. Krillin moved over and placed a comforting hand on Gohan's shoulder. Hey come on man, it's over. You and Goku finally finished it. Tears welled in Gohan's eyes, and Frieza saw that despite the fearsome visage he displayed earlier, he hadn't grown that much from the scared child on Namek. It's my fault, if I had just done what Dad said and killed him, Dad would still be around. Krillin helped him stand. Come on, let's get you home. He walked over and picked up Android 18. Goku seemed happy, in the end. Getting to see you so strong. He said, managing to smile at his little buddy. Deep down, he was just as broken. How do you deal with losing your best friend? Goku flew behind King Kai and his friends as they flew across Snake Way. Sorry about getting you mixed up in all this King Kai. Goku said, looking to the halos that now adorned all their heads. I can't believe you got my planet blown up. King Kai snapped, I'm the lord of this galaxy, I deserved more than that. Goku gave another laugh, that's why I'm apologizing so much. He went silent for a moment and glanced about. So did Cell's spirit go straight to hell or what? Kai paused mid-flight. Wait, now that you mention it, anyone who dies is sent before Yama. A shocking realization hit him, and it chilled him to his very core that means Cell is still alive. What? Goku yelled in shock. Is the android still alive? Vegeta asked, looming over Krillin. We should kill it, leave no trace of Jiro's abominations. He spat. Krillin gave a nervous laugh. Come on, she wasn't as bad as Cell. There was a sudden explosion behind the group where Cell and Goku had been standing mere minutes ago. Their eyes widened in shock because while the figure was concealed by the dust storm of the explosion, they could recall this intruder's Kai quite vividly. Trunks, the poor boy from the future, untransformed, he couldn't see the beam coming from the smoke. But Frieza, transformed into his fifth state, he saw it coming and moved just fast enough to shoulder bit Trunks away. The gold beam pierced Frieza's once white chest, tore clean through his heart. Frieza fell back, blood gushing from the fist-sized hole that had torn through one of his most vital organs, and landed with a dull thud on the dark ground. His ruby eyes had shrunk in size, now nothing but red pins in a field of black. His fingers twitched slightly. And there he laid, Cell's mocking voice being muffled into nothing. Who did I hit there? Frieza. Well, at least that takes care of the second strongest among you. Cell remarked, the dust around him clearing. He was in his perfect form again, somehow, but he was different. Lightning was now arsing around his body, like Son Gohan. Frieza, Vegeta said in shock, staring down at the dying Arcosian. Trunks had plucked himself up slowly, also gaping at the Arcosian. Why would you of all people save my son? Vegeta asked. The two triangular slits over Frieza's mouth slid open, and he hawked up a large glob of blood. Right thing, the only thing to do, he said, unable to even look up to meet Vegeta's gaze. Something's not something wrong with me. Died saving a Saiyan, the same one who killed my father. Maybe I really am insane. He recalled the current situation when he heard Cell's mocking laughter. Boy please you, he trailed off, gobbing up more blood. Gohan, a Super Saiyan 2 once more, turned his head slightly to view Frieza. Gohan, please win, no matter the cost. Have to stop him. Inian knelt beside him, sobbing softly and gripping Frieza's pale hand. My lord, no, you can't die, not you, she whimpered. Slack was trembling, clenching his fists boldly. He couldn't just stand idly by. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Frieza took a gasp of air, summoning up whatever strength he could. Inian PL, please, if you ever thought of me as your friend, please tell me that everything that happened from the moment we met actually happened. Please, tell me that I didn't die on Namek and didn't dream everything, please. Inian wiped the tears from her eyes. She couldn't even recall the last time she ever cried. It all happened, my lord. You and I became friends and you became a hero, saving so many people. She choked out, drops from her eyes staining the dirt. Good, I'm so glad that I won't die, a monster, Frieza uttered out. Those red pins that had been his eyes lost all light and faded away, leaving only black hollows where his eyes were. Frieza had breathed his last. The group aboard the Snow King watched a probe in shock, seeing their lord and captain die right before their eyes. Polaria's weeping, shutting her hands over her eyes to muffle the sounds of her sobbing. Ace was crying openly now too, the tears glistening down her cheeks slowly. The planet might have been saved, but we lost Lord Frieza. I'd rather have been taken with him. Midgaya said, balling his small fists. Android 16 remained silent, as he so often did. He doubted anything he said would be able to elevate their spirits. He could see the other cause for their grief, however. Just what would they all do without Lord Frieza to lead them? Gohan shut his eyes tight to fight back tears. Another dead, because of his foolish inaction. He glared at Cell and spat. How the hell are you alive again? Have you forgotten of my regenerative abilities, Gohan? Cell asked. I was able to regenerate from a single cell, and much to my shock I was restored to my perfect form. But, I had actually undergone a Zenkai, unlocking this grand power, and I even obtained Goku's instant transmission. I believe we're back to square one now, with me powerful enough to wipe you all out. The cocky smirk graced his smug features once more. See, Gohan. Your father died for nothing. If anything, he only succeeded in making me stronger once again. I'm the apex predator of the entire universe. Bastard, Slack roared, emerald fire coiling up into one hand. It wasn't supposed to be this way, he roared, preparing to fling his fireball at Cell. Quick as a flash, Cell had shot 2 fingers forth and fired a small orb of purple Kai at Slack. The ball of energy struck the Namekian in the chest and smothered him in a powerful explosion, launching him away until he smashed into a boulder in the distance. HMPH. I haven't forgotten how dangerous those flames of yours are. And I'd advise you stay your hand if you don't want to end up the same way, Piccolo. Cell growled. Slack was alive, barely. A large chunk missing from his abdomen, one of his arms hanging on by a few charred strands of flesh at the elbow. NGHN, no, stop him, have to. At this, Gohan gave an enraged yell and dashed at Cell, their fists colliding at the same time and shattering the earth beneath them in a mighty shockwave. They started punching each other skyward, moving so fast that none on the ground could even follow their motions, only faint afterimages and shockwaves in the air. Gohan's elbow struck Cell in the nose, sending his foe hurtling through several spires of rock, which collapsed into piles of dusty debris from the force behind the impact, but with instant transmission Cell was straight behind the boy once more, his fist striking Gohan almost 100 meters away. Cell raised a finger up and started firing a barrage of death beams, the bolts of Kai passing through afterimages and striking distant mountains, vaporizing their peaks on every impact. "Stand still you brat," Cell snarled. Gohan moved swiftly and formed an orb of Kai in one hand, promptly flinging it in an arc towards Cell. It struck Cell's hand, causing the mutant to hiss in pain, once the exploding energy bolt jarred his hand from purple to a crispy black. The half-Saiyan dashed forth and slammed his fists into Cell's stomach, the bio-android gagging from the shock and the pain. Enraged, Cell brought his elbow crashing down on Gohan's face, sending him soaring down. In a flash he was behind Gohan once more, delivering a swift roundhouse to Gohan's face, which sent a spurt of blood into the air as Gohan soared back across the horizon. But as he flew back, Gohan managed to move his hands up to his forehead and started gathering Kai as quick as he could. Masenko he roared, a beam of gold light launching from his raised hands. It crossed the distance at a shocking pace, catching Cell in a powerful explosion that sent Cell crashing to Earth, forming a deep crater where he landed. Gohan got up, inspected the damage that his own crash landing had done to his guy. Missing most of the top half gone, but it could be worse. He glared at Cell from the distance which separated them, watching Cell drop into a fighting stance. "You little shit, I'll destroy you, and this entire worthless planet." Across the wasteland, the surviving Z-fighter watched with unblinking gazes, seeing the two super warriors duke it out. Piccolo, however, was soon distracted by Slack's faint voice calling out to him. "D Piccolo, please to me, we don't have much time left." "So, Frieza, your moral scales are convoluted to say the least," King Yemma remarked, tapping his chin with a pencil the size of an oak tree, his eyes transfixed on a large notebook as opposed to the Arcosian who was staring up at him in his fourth form. "Lived a good portion of your life pillaging, plundering, enslaving and destroying planets, but in the last few years you've saved several planets, destroyed threats which would no doubt be more destructive than you if left to their own devices, you even died saving the life of someone else." Yemma glanced down at Frieza for a moment. "Deciding where to put you in the afterlife is quite a conundrum, as you can probably imagine." Frieza gave a small nod of his head. "Yes, I'm aware, sir. And I'll take whatever sentence you give to me without complaint," he replied. Right now he couldn't get over how bizarre the afterlife was. A giant celestial office. Folklore was certainly wrong on this one. "But," Yemma replied curtly, "hell is too severe, but you haven't really done enough to earn heaven. Therefore, I sentence you to purgatorio." Before Yemma could finish his sentence, Goku suddenly appeared before his desk, his fingertips pressing against his forehead. "King Yemma, wait," Goku called out, causing Yemma to stay his hand for the time being. "Can you pass judgment later? I'd like Frieza to be able to see the end of the battle between Gohan and Cell," Goku explained. Yemma raised his brows and then furrowed them in anger. "Do you realize how unorthodox that is, Goku? I have a job to do, and that job is judging every soul that winds up at my desk." Goku gave a nervous laugh. "Come on, King Yemma, do me a solid here. If it weren't for me or Frieza, that line would be a billion times longer right now. Just a few hours, please," Goku pleaded. Yemma gave a growl of annoyance. "Very well. 4 hours, that's all the time you get." Goku grinned and bowed to the red-skinned giant before wrapping an arm around Frieza's shoulders, quickly using his instant transmission to reappear beside King Kai on Snake Way. The portly deity looked down at Frieza, his distaste quite visible on his face. "Hello, Frieza," he greeted glumly. "Hello, strange fat blue man whom I've never seen before in my life," Frieza replied, a curious look on his face. Seemed he was infamous even outside the realm of the living. "I'm King Kai, I oversee the North Galaxy, the same galaxy you've caused so much trouble in," King Kai growled out, clenching his fists. "I'm also the best martial arts master in this galaxy." "Really?" Frieza asked, tilting his head to the side. "What? How dare you doubt me, you little I'm not doing these shenanigans anymore. Goku, come quick, the battle between Cell and Gohan is growing a lot more intense," King Kai said, turning to Goku. The spiky-haired Saiyan gave a nod in response and placed a hand on King Kai's back, his expression immediately growing more worried with whatever it was he sensed. "Oh man, with the energy they're building up, they could easily destroy the Earth if they aren't careful enough," Goku remarked. Cell gave a grin, a large orb of energy building between his cupped hands. It looked like one of Cooler's supernova balls, crackling and humming with powers. "Hahaha, let's see how confident you are, you brat. When you get a taste of my Nova Kamehameha, I'll destroy you, then the Earth, and then I'll spread my wrath across the universe." Gohan gave an irritated growl, a super Kamehameha of the normal blue hue forming in his hands. Like hell, I'll make you pay for all the harm you've caused. The power being built by the two was enormous, sending tremors across the land, raising up shattered stone into the air, lighting up the wasteland in the distinct colors behind their energy attacks. The two mightiest beings on Earth, possibly the entire universe, about to release their power in a bid to change the Earth as they see fit. They yelled out and shot their attacks forth in unison, Kai clashing and forming a massive dome that seemed to go back and forth randomly. It seemed they were dead even right now, their power magnifying and sending powerful earthquakes across the Warden battlefield. Across the wasteland, Piccolo stared down at Slack, who was shakily raising his good hand up. Slack, are you sure you want to do this? He asked. The older Namekian managed to nod slowly. Yes, we need to do whatever we can to stop Cell, and you need to get out there to help your student. He needs you most right now. Slack explained. Damn, we have nothing to lose, right? Piccolo gave a nod and tightly gripped Slack's hand. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten. He assured him. Only if we win. Slack whispered out, gripping Piccolo's hand with all his remaining strength. A wide aura wrapped itself around Slack's body, and a soft smile graced his features as the whiteness seemed to consume his whole body, the white flare of Kai being quickly absorbed into Piccolo's body. When Piccolo rose to stand again, he seemed different. Taller, by a few inches or so, his features looking slightly sterner now. Holy crap, Krillin remarked, sensing that jump in Piccolo's Kai. This power level, it's enormous. Yamcha chimed in. Piccolo remained silent for the moment and glared toward the Kamehameha battle between Gohan and Cell, still in a tight deadlock. I'm putting an end to this. Piccolo growled, a green aura of Kai flaring up around his body just before he raced skyward to the duel which shook the world. While from an outsider perspective it would seem as though the two super warriors were equal in power, Gohan was holding back. He was exerting just enough power to keep Cell's own attack at bay, but he held back for fear high full wrath would destroy the Earth. Despite the cacophony of noise their energy blasts were causing, Gohan could still hear Cell's cackling quite clearly through the noise. Haha, no chance, you have no chance. Gohan gave a grunt and braced his body against another shockwave from Cell's attack. Hey Gohan, can you hear me? A voice called out in the young half-Saiyan's mind. Father? Gohan asked, stunned to hear his father's voice. Is that really you? How are you talking to me? Kai's given me permission to talk to you through him. Frieza's here with me. Goku explained. You can't be afraid to hold back, not when Cell's posing a threat to the entire universe. Give it everything you've got. Okay Dad, Gohan called back, managing to smile despite the danger, and I'm sorry. I let my feelings get the best of me, and because of that you and Frieza are dead. Don't worry about it, me and the guys can have a real good time up here, Goku replied. HMPH, speak for yourself, homewrecker. King Kai chimed in. Earthquakes raged across the planet, affecting distant cities from the force behind the combined Kamehameha wave clash. The other warriors on the battlefield had to power up just to ensure they wouldn't be blown away by the gale force winds being released by their combined might. All except Piccolo, who traversed the chaos with minimal difficulty. Cell was about to cackle again, but the laugh grew into a high-pitched howl of agony as he was struck between the wings by a special beam cannon, which was drilling into Cell's flesh. Piccolo. How the hell is he powerful enough to harm me? Cell roared. Piccolo gave a loud yell of exertion, deciding then and there to try out a technique he'd imagined ever since he started using Namekian magic. Burning special beam cannon, he yelled, green fire traveling along the once yellow spiral of his special beam cannon. The green blaze struck Cell from behind, and fire began to swarm along Cell's wings and arms, making Cell howl, the fire starting to melt at his flesh. Now Gohan, let your power explode. Gohan gave a loud yell and pumped more of his Kai into the blast, cleaving through Cell's own blast and starting to absorb him. The mutant gave a garbled yell as his melting form was blown apart. I don't believe it, I can't die. In seconds Cell was overwhelmed, every nanoscopic fragment of his form being destroyed by the Kamehameha wave so bright that for the briefest of moments, it could be seen from space. Finally, Gohan stopped pouring out energy and the light of the world returned to its normal hue. The earth stopped shaking, the wind stopped wailing, and large plumes of dust rose from the trenches and craters formed by the Kamehameha clash. Gohan's hair went from gold to its normal black hue, and he started to fall to earth before Piccolo quickly caught him. We did it, Gohan said, managing to give Piccolo a weak thumbs up. Yes, we did. I'm very proud of you. Piccolo replied, managing to smile at his student. He did it, woo, he did it, Yamcha yelled out excitedly, his voice visible even across the vast distance. The other Z-warriors quickly gathered around Gohan and Piccolo. Come on kiddo, let's get you to the lookout. A senzu will fix you right up. But that the group departed, leaving Vegeta floating behind, staring at Frieza's corpse, being lifted into Inyan's arms. The ebony Saiyanus flew off silently, heading after the group. Frieza, you of all people, why did you, of all people, have to be the one to save my son's life? He growled silently, clenching his gloved fists. He lingered for a moment and then flew off into the distance. Yahoo, he won, I knew he could do it, Goku yelled excitedly, leaping about Snake Way. You didn't lie, your boy's strength is to be admired. Frieza remarked, managing to smile at his former foe. Anyway, I have a request for you too. He added. King Kai and Goku looked his way, and Frieza spoke again, I want to visit heaven to see my mother. The prince said, folding his arms. Your mother? Goku asked slowly, there are girls in your species? He asked. Yes. Why would you think otherwise? Frieza asked. Well, it's just you're naked all the time, and I've never seen your you-know. Frieza was quiet for a moment, trying to puzzle out Goku's meaning, and once he realized what Goku was getting at, his white skin seemed to turn bright red, and he gave an angry grunt, they're stored internally, you moron, I'm not some gelding, and I'm certainly not some egg-laying eunuch, I've got a dong, now shut it, he yelled, causing Goku to step back nervously. Well, shall we go? King Kai asked, ignoring the exchange. Alright, Frieza said, calming himself, tell your friends to wait about let's say 2 hours before using the Dragon Balls to undo the damage Cell caused. The Arcosian said. Goku gave a nod and made the arrangements through telepathy before King Kai teleported them to the heavenly plane with his instantaneous movement. The end we will continue in next part, till then bye.